Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen out there in the public. We apparently had a lightning strike at our education network transmission up in Boynton, so we're back on the air. So I don't know where we were at, Mr. Oswald. I think you had it last.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Barbieri. And we're moving into our second section of the presentation for our viewers out there regarding distance learning reimagined. So we heard from many stakeholders throughout the end of the school year, throughout the summer, around how to make improvements in distance learning. Dr. Sheffield will be talking about those major improvements and how we are going to deliver a better product come when we start school. Also, we're going to talk in depth regarding our connectivity. So Mr. Howard is going to talk about the improvements and working with our partners to ensure that all of our students have reliable internet connection devices at the start of the school year. And then Mr. Howard or Mr. Oaxaca and Mr. McCormick will talk about ESE and English language learners, which all those pieces will be put into the template for the state regarding the improvements in those areas in a distance learning environment. So at this time, Dr. Sheffield.
So we're going to have a reliable connection just like the kids are going to have when they're distance learning. Is that what you're telling us?
Unless lightning strikes, I'm not sure. So,
okay. Dr. Sheffield.
Well, good evening. And as we continue to review the district's reopening plans, it is important that I stress that this reopening plan is an overarching plan for all district operating schools. The differentiation on drilling down to the content specifics and other areas will take place at each individual school sites, where the principal supervisors will work collaboratively with the school leaders and their team members. This is necessary, as I'm sure we all understand the complexity of the various schools within each of our regions. As always, the academic team will continue to establish systems to ensure the success for all. As we had planned these past few months, the academic team took time to review comments and receive constructive feedback from our parents, our students, school leaders, and teachers as they were contacting the offices, the academic office with many of their challenges and successes, I should say. I'm in the midst of reviewing the constructive feedback. It was evident that should we need to continue with distance learning, that we needed to provide a more robust experience in a few of the following areas that we're going to mention tonight, such as scheduling, the instructional delivery, and the service expectations. And when I say service expectations, I'm referring to our services for our ESE and our ELL students. And most importantly, our attendance and our grading expectation. We know that during these last 4 months, some of our students, their families, and even our employees have experienced some form of uncertainty. And therefore, as a district, we have built in activities for our social and emotional learning. This will assist our teachers in building what we have been asked to do, particularly with building a positive learning community within our distance learning platform. In addition, we're excited to say that we're going to be able to continue to provide support for our student wellness, which will include mental and behavioral health services. And these services is going to be able to be continued and provided by our behavior and our mental health professionals. Now, as we go into talking particularly, on the next slide, to talk particularly about some of our learning expectations and what we've learned and how things are going to look differently. As I mentioned earlier, with these detailed expectations, which were developed as a result of our constructive feedback from our parents, students, and district staff. I also want to stress this evening that during these conversations that it was clear that these expectations that we will be talking about needed to be aligned for both the adult and the student learners, meaning that not just some strong expectations for our teachers, but we needed to set some very strong expectations and guidance for our students that will be participating in distance learning as well. And this is going to allow for more accountability and tighten our efforts of providing a more rigorous instructional environment. And surely in providing that more rigorous instructional environment in which we all are destined for, it's going to take the efforts of all parties that are involved. here from the central office, from our regional offices, principal supervisors, working with district team, working with the school centers, with the resource teachers there, and most importantly, being on the ground out there supporting the teachers virtually and our students. So draft of these documents in which we came up with to help create and tighten and strengthen our distance learning platform, were shared and revised in conjunction with, we had teachers from each of our regions. We'd asked each of the regional offices to provide us the list of teachers. So we had a group of teachers from each region, which was very delightful to conversate with them and to share our thought process and to receive some feedback, which was very, very helpful to us here at the central office. School-based administrators, we were able to even share our thoughts with our school-based administrators, a group of our school-based administrators. And most importantly, I tell you the work that we've been able to do with Justin Katz and Theo Harris and the team there at with the Classroom Teachers Association has just been amazing. And thank you to Vicki for helping us navigate through that. And so right now where we are is that we definitely have a very great draft of the memo of understanding in regards to what these expectations would look like. And we were just going through the final stages. And as we continue to discuss that distance learning platform, it was also evident that the classes should be held on a schedule that mirrors the Bell schedule that follows each student's homeschool schedule. And later, what you're going to see in a few slides, you're going to see some slides showing a daily schedule for each level. And as we all are aware, we are mandated to provide a minimum amount of instructional minutes daily. And as we continuously talk about, and I heard someone said earlier in regards to how difficult it would be for our elementary students as it pertains to that's 335 minutes daily in terms of what the expectations would be for them on a daily basis. And that's where we get into talking about the creativity and the differentiation. And that's why the school centers will be so involved in making certain that the systems in which they're creating within their campuses are very unique to their environment, because we know the environment is different within every school campuses. So I would move on to the next slide. And as we go on to the next slide, it talks about, and we will say to provide a better experience for our teachers and students, some of the things in which we would need to do. And Keith, if you would back up one slide, please, I think we are ahead. And that's about all teachers will be expected to follow the daily schedule as established by the principal. And the team, we just cannot stress enough that each school will continue to provide and create systems for their schools, even with us assisting in creating and giving a sample of clear expectations and what those daily schedules should look like. It will still be tailored to the culture of that school. And this again will allow for the creativity, as I'm talking about, of our teachers and our school-based leaders. The flexibility does not leave the responsibility of the school site and the teachers having the opportunity to put their authenticity behind it. And then all teachers will follow the district scope and sequence. This is a non-negotiable. This is not something that has been in the past, to where all teachers will be following the district scope and sequence as applicable. And with that, the Division of Teaching and Learning here with academics, we will continue to support our teachers as we have been supporting them, our teachers, our parents, and our students via our electronic helpline that we'll utilize in the spring. And I can tell you, our teachers, our students, and our parents, they really and truly utilize the electronic helpline. And we have the team here that's been working all summer on the curriculum portion, and we are definitely will be ready for our teachers to provide that assistance. And the regional offices and the instructional team members there, the coaches and all those resource teachers that we have there on the school campuses, they will continuously work together and working together with us here at the central office on creating the progress monitoring tools, in meaning that in regards to how we are monitoring and making certain that we are indeed providing some instructional, what the level of instruction in which we are providing to our students, to the families during this digital learning platform is meeting the needs. Is it working? If it's not working, how can we make those adjustments? And we would only know that by having a robust monitoring system in place. And all teachers will be expected to meet with students every day. This is something that is definitely new for us for this on-site here for the fall of distance learning, is that all students will have live instruction daily from their teacher. This is a non-negotiable. And this is why the expectation is that students will be logging in daily during their set class time or content area time, a period, based on the secondary schools is by periods and the elementary school is daily or what have you. And also, before I forget, I do want to mention that as our students are used to, and this was a feedback that we had gathered from many of our families, talking in regards to just knowing what the expectations are the goals for the day, is that another non-negotiable for us is that in the Google Classroom at the beginning of each day is that our agendas, just as if we would have done in a brick and mortar, will be posted for our students and their families so that everyone will know what is the attended outcome for that day. And of course, teachers will be having scheduling their office hours, and their office hours will allow them to be able to have that one-on-one time with the students and parents if needed. And this will just go back to those virtual parent conferences that will be allowed to be scheduled. And again, it's not something that it's an option. It's a form of office hour, which is the duty in which teachers would have been doing if they were within brick and mortar. And as we move on to the next slide, and I did hear, and as we talk with our students would say that because we were not on, say, a particular schedule as it pertains to what we were used to in the school, there are times that I would just become overwhelmed with the amount of work that I've been given. So in trying to just work in and also receiving the feedback from the teachers and working through some of this, is that we have said that students will have a minimum of at least 24 hours. And again, that's a minimum of at least 24 hours to complete any kind of assignments. And then as we talk about the progress monitoring, as I mentioned earlier, and we know to inform teaching and learning, we will have those formative and summative assessments. And those assessments will continue to be given here from the central office. And we will, from the central office, work with, the regional teams, school teams, and talking as it pertains to, in this distance world, what will those assessments look like? And we know the assessments is all for the intended purpose of informing teaching and learning so that we can ingest the instruction if our students are not getting it, to try to help to differentiate and to meet our students just as if we were in the classroom to the best of our ability. And again, I am not saying that this instruction is going to be anywhere close to what it was there in the classroom, but what I am saying is that it definitely will be better in where we left off in the spring from what we had to do when we left on March 13th, and we're putting those systems in place. And the grading, all of our students and for our families, and the questions that were coming in about grading and through the distance learning is that because of the systems that we've put into place, we will continue to utilize the district's student progression plan for all grading. And then we went into talking about the attendance. And as we all know, when we talk about the attendance, and then when we talk about the accountability, again, not just for our adult learners, but for our student learners as well. So if the expectation is that our teachers are logging on into their Google Meet classroom every day live, they're really digging deep because the teachers are just awesome. And they have done some wonderful things in terms of what we had to do last spring, is that we do have an expectation that our students will be logging in, participating in the live instruction during their scheduled class time. We also have the expectation that our students will be logging in on time. And if they're late in logging in, then that's considered to be a tardy, just as if it was in brick and mortar. We do have a responsibility. We do have to again, account for our attendance. And as we continue to navigate and go through many of what the requirements are from the state, this is definitely a big piece, and which should be an expectation for us in regards to making certain that we are identifying and we are tracking our students, those that are in attendance, and if they are not in attendance, and we do have in a deeper part of our document, which all those pieces are not here, as we worked with the union around the expectations and so forth, is what that looks like in regards to what we would do as a school center and as a district staff, and assisting and reaching out to those families when we've noticed that our students have been inactive and are not participating in our distance learning, because that is the responsibility of ours. And then, yes.
Before you move to the next slide, I'm sorry, if you're not done, there's a couple board members who want to ask questions, but if you're not done with this slide, go ahead and continue.
And then, yes, and the last piece of this slide was one, and we talked about it and we found that we had to create and work around our student code of conduct in this distance space. And we will continue to work around and work with our students and understanding what does that student code of conduct looks like in this distance space. And all of that will come as I continue to move through the presentation and as we get later into the presentation to talk about the onboarding for the teachers, the professional development, not just for teachers, but the onboarding and the trainings for our parents and for our students.
All right, we have 3 board members who wanted to ask questions so far. Mrs. Andrews, then Ms. Brill, then Mrs. Whitfield. Mrs. Andrews.
Yes, I'm really concerned about this piece because I know this is ramped up, and thank you so much, Dr. Sheffield. But the piece is about how we're going to know when students are chronically absent, whose responsibility will it be to help that child? Because we're talking about making sure that every kid has a Chromebook, a laptop, one-on-one. They're going to have internet connection. We really don't have that much time in between all of that. And so as we begin this process, I'm worried that some kids could really fall between the cracks, and they did this past year. And I love it that the teachers are going to be monitoring and doing everything that they can do to give instruction. But if our kids don't have laptops, don't have internet connection, because in some places, as we go through this PowerPoint, it's not going to be in place until, later on in the fall. So when kids are not getting where they need to be and they're chronically absent, they can't get on. What's new from what we did this past year to make sure that we didn't lose somebody and we're blaming the child because they don't have what they need? What is new in this?
One thing that is new, Mrs. Andrews, is that in the spring when we went to distance learning, and the system in which we had utilized through SIS, and this is just one piece of it, and I'll continue to tell you the other pieces, that will do the phone call to just notify the families that your child may have been absent or may have been tardy or whatever. That was turned off while we tried to navigate through this. So for this form of distance learning, because of the more robust piece that we have around the attendance and the accountability pieces, we are turning that piece back on, and that's with PJ and his team. That piece will be turned on. Also, another piece in which we have put in there into another document that you wouldn't see here is that principals will be identifying the individuals on their team that will be monitoring, particularly with the attendance. There's some big bucket pieces around the attendance, and who will be monitoring that. Teachers know who they will make contact with in regards to notifying as it pertains to when there's an issue come up around the attendance. Also, as a district, we do have a responsibility as it pertains to when a student has been absent for 5 or more days, where we send out those attendance letters and so forth, where we would go back to our processes that we did just as if we were in brick and mortar. So it's all around the accountability and putting those systems and identifying those key personnels for those areas in which we are monitoring very tightly. And attendance is one of those areas. So at the school site, within the document, it specifically says, and we're meeting with principals tomorrow morning at 9, that talks about identifying the principal or the principal designee, whomever they identify as their designee, that is monitoring the attendance, that's just one piece, the attendance concern, which is a big piece, because we want to make sure that we're continuing to track. But we're not just leaving that at the school site, because we here at the central office also have access to that. So we will work with, I would work with my team in making certain that we too are looking at those hits and who seems to be missing, to make certain that we are continuously trying to identify those students, Ms. Andrews. And you are correct. That it's our job to make certain that those that we have not made that connection with, and we've said we do not need to wait until August 10th. We already know who these students are. Then why not now begin to, and we do have the list, and Keith can chime in, to where those students have already been identified. So now working around a plan and beginning to, how do we now get ready to deploy those devices and so forth into the hands of those students? Because we do not need to wait on that.
And just to follow up, Ms. Sheffield, just on a telephone conversation is not going to work. I know that we're in a pandemic right now, but we're going to have to be able to connect with community resources and others and make some home visits and do some drive-bys or whatever. As I've spoken to some of the folks in the far west region, we've got to find these children because they're out there.
Okay, I agree. And then I know Mr. Hoaka, when he comes on, will be able to talk about what we've been doing with our ELL population as it pertaining to identifying those students and bringing back our CLFs, and making those connections, because there's definitely a large group of our students in which we need to make certain of that we do not, again, allow to start the school year and do not have those available resources. And he'll be able to talk about that when he comes on.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So we tonight, in our own meeting experienced what can happen with technology. So I want to mention that, if a student is absent and is marked absent in SIS or tardy and marked T in SIS, I would ask that the teacher find out why they were late or why they were absent. Because perfect example is that I lost my internet for a day when the landscaper cut the line. So if technology fails a student, I don't want that student to be penalized. If they have the technology, it should be on. But I think before we just start marking people like that, because we see what happens with technology. We see what happens. We're in rainy season if there is a lightning strike. So I do think we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible and make sure that we are not penalizing students for something that's beyond their control. Thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sheffield, for all this work. I'm sorry to jump in, but I do want to talk about the attendance piece a little bit too. So thank you for letting me do that. The first thing I really think I need to say is that I have also been brought around to the Mrs. McQuinn School of Thought. We need to wait on starting school. And one of the reasons that I want to wait is I really don't think our kids are fully ready for this. I don't think that I know we still have a lot of kids out there that are still working with maybe 2 or 3 or 4 kids to a device. And so how would they, if we don't have computers in yet, and I'm curious when they're going to be in, how would they deal if they have to watch at a later time? Do they get counted for attendance for that?
Well, Mrs. Whitfield, and I'll answer some pieces to your question in regards to the sharing of devices. And that is part that we are also aware of. And actually, Mark will be coming on. And we've talked this morning in regards to, there is a way we're trying to, and we can do it, is identifying those families to where there are sharing devices in the home. Because when we talk about using their daily schedule, it's going to be very difficult for them to share devices. So at this moment in time, what we're saying is that we're pretty much going to a one-to-one device. And again, in regards to, and what we're doing is that we've figured out that there are some devices out there. We right now are cleaning the devices that have been returned from our seniors that have graduated. And so we are, again, in a place in terms of, and I'm not the one that are setting up in terms of getting the devices out, but the team will be working in regards to identifying those students and putting these devices out. Because you are correct, we will not be able to do the sharing of devices. With what we are having and how tight we are wanting it, it will have to be the one-to-one device. And I wanted to pull up the more specific comprehensive document that talks about that responsibility around that attendance piece and how we are helping and not just leaving it to the families, to the parents or the student in terms of monitoring, or even the teachers. Is that one piece was that, and as I pulled it up, and I think I did say that, it's our responsibility to, again, where we will assign someone there that will be like that attendance liaison on that campus. But most importantly, and I had it highlighted here, was working collaboratively, how important it was going to be for the school site to work collaboratively, particularly the administrator with the teacher and the parent on resolving any attendance issues, simply because of what you brought up, Mrs. Brill, as it pertains to those mishaps, because things do happen and we understand, that things do happen. And that's why it's just going to be so important that we just work together and pretty much it has to be some tight monitoring pieces in place and just making sure that we are maintaining and monitoring accurate records.
Well, and let me finish up just really quickly a couple of things that I wanted to mention along this lines too. First of all, I would love an answer on when the computers are coming in, our next shipment of them that we're working on, because I know we are ordering some. So I'd love that answer. And then also, I think that we really need to plan for some district staff that's going to actually help some of our schools, because some schools had a few kids who didn't get on, and some schools had half their kids who didn't get on. And so I think we really need to make sure that we have backup plans for those principals and those assistant principals who are going to need extra help to make sure that these students really can be followed up with, because the burden is going to be completely uneven. And then the last thing I wanted to say about the August start date is it's my understanding that without having to stress the governor out, we can still start anytime in August. So I think August 31st is a Monday, would be a good option. We can still be in August. We can start the day as late as humanly possible. And I really think we need to try to spend as little time in virtual as humanly possible, because I have to say it was terrible. Like, I'm going to say one more time, my experience. It's my experience. My daughter had amazing teachers who showed up every day and worked really hard, and she still struggled. And I think that's the case with a lot of these parents that called in, is that they watched it not work for their child. And so that's the one that they're the most worried about, is the one they've seen it not work well with. So I think even with our best efforts, virtual still won't be that good. And so I think that's one of the reasons that I really want to push it back, is spend as little time in virtual now, and then at the end of the year, tack on those extra weeks when hopefully the world looks a little more normal.
And to answer your question about the computers, we were in a meeting this morning, and it was the meeting, August 17th is what DPOC gave us, the date that we should start our first shipment of receiving computers. And we're looking at receiving about 10,000 per week.
Ms. Sanders, before I call on you, I've got a question for you, Dr. Sheffield. And this is no surprise, because I talked to you about it, I talked to Ms. Roswell about it, and I've talked to the superintendent about it. When I talked to Mr. Howard last week, the estimate is there's about 10% of the children in this district that do not have a way to connect to us well, because they either don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have cellular service. Certainly we could get them computers, but if they don't have the connectivity, it doesn't make any difference. So, if it's going to take pushback of the starting date, which I'm fully in favor of, certainly I would not vote to start distance learning unless we're sure that every single child in this district can connect to us, because otherwise we're leaving some children behind. So I know that you all have assured me that you're working on that. I guess Mr. Howard's going to discuss that with us when we get to that point in this presentation. But the question on this slide is that I think that obviously we have to mark students absent, and I agree with either whoever said it, Mrs. Whitfield or whoever, that if the kids can't connect, then we got to find out why they're not there instead of just marking them absent. But with respect to the elementary school children, tardies some of these children, they're going to have trouble going from, logging on and off. And so I hope that we're not, older children certainly can figure out, middle school and high school kids for the most part can figure out how to log on to a system once they're told how to do it. But elementary school kids, especially our children that are in the areas where their family may not speak English and have difficulties understanding directions. We got to be careful about marking little ones tardy because it took them 10 or 15 minutes to figure out how to get back into the class. So I hope we're not going to be so tight on that we mark a lot of those younger children tardy for that. Mrs. Andrews?
And just a quickie, the Hispanic Education Coalition did their own survey, and they came up with the 16,000 children who did not have access to the internet. I mean, you know who these pockets, you know where these pockets are, all over Palm Beach County, in the Lake Worth area, Mayan population, many of our Hispanic children out in the Glades region. We know a lot of these children did not have access. So I know it's easy to write a report and put it in a template and send it to the state. We've got to have something different, not just with our employees, but we've got to partner with the community leaders and stakeholders and these cities out there where these children are, because they're not getting on. And if we don't begin to build that relationship, so we'll find out why and where, and somebody that knows the neighborhood that can help us go from door to door to get these computers there and to make sure they get the hotspots or whatever they need. It can't just be done with our staff. We've got to build these partnerships quickly and effectively so that these children will be able to get on, to say they're present, okay? And it's a real issue. I've been reading with the Glades region. They've put some pieces together that's a little bit more than what we have on this reopening, the distance learning. So I will be sharing that with you because it's going to take more than just what we're saying right here to make it happen.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you. And I was going to ask this question when we got up to the slide about digital learning, but since we're talking about the computers right now, and staff can answer this, Mr. Oswald, later on if you prefer, but what I wanted to know, because we do know there are definitely going to be children that will not have access. That's a fact, no matter what we do. So I need to know, what is the plan for students while they don't have digital access, and how are we going to meet their needs? So you can address that now or address it later.
Yeah, Mr. Howard, if you want to jump in about a lot of what we have in place to begin as early as tomorrow with our principals around what we're doing to start getting our parents connected as early as next week.
Thanks, Mr. Oswald. The board has been fair in their suggestions about engaging the community. I hope that you'll see the work that we've been doing. We're certainly trying to do that. We've been meeting with a group from the Economic Council and the Business Development Board and other nonprofits to kind of marshal all of the resources of the community. And I think we have some pretty promising progress to report. In addition to the 450 hotspots that we've put out in the Glades as a stopgap for summer learning, we have identified another 1,200 sponsorships from the Children's Services Council. Today we received a written commitment for another 1,000 families in the Glades community. But in working with each of our vendors and working with Mr. Burke and Mr. Oswald earlier today, I think what we've identified is some solutions that we may be able to scale in the next 4 to 6 weeks to meet some of the needs, so that we're, our challenge because of having so many students is finding an affordable solution that will scale. And I believe through this new program with Comcast, sponsored services, that we can find a way to cover nearly 15,000 of our students between that and hotspots. The time frame on that would be 4 to 6 weeks. And Mr. Burke is really working on the funding sources for that and trying to identify that. And we have calls tomorrow with Comcast. We're meeting with Sprint and T-Mobile. What we're trying to do is really negotiate the best deal to extend our dollars as far as we can. Mr. Barbieri, you and I spoke earlier in the week. We know that this is a real challenge, right? That if this is different than the spring, I think where we were responding to a crisis, what we're saying now is we're upping the game. It's about quality. It's about a sustained quality engagement. In order to do that, we have to be able to provide a solution that will allow each student to connect to the internet So I think we have some solutions that we can bring to bear that would scale that.
But
Mr. Howard, yesterday I spoke with Commissioner McKinley, and she had a couple ideas that she was given to her staff that would help in the Glades area. And one of those is, she told me that the agricultural community out there has a Wi-Fi system or cell system out there, and they're willing to, she said they were willing to work with the school district to allow us to utilize those until they get into their farming schedule, where then we would overwhelm their system. So if you want to have someone from the administration contact either Commissioner McKinley's office or Virginia Baker, probably she's already aware of this, because Commissioner McKinley told me she was referring it to staff. So, and she had another idea at this moment, I don't remember what it was, but she had a couple ideas on how we would connect students out in the Glades area. Mrs. Andrews may know about that also. I saw a hand from, I don't know, Mrs.
Can I add something? May I add something to that?
Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're really worried that the children will not be able to hook up. But I want to thank Florida Crystals for actually jumping right on board just yesterday with the Wi-Fi extenders. Mark, you know a little bit about that. So thank you so much for working with them. And everybody's trying to work together, because when we have a plan and if we don't have it and ready to go, we're going to lose some children. So I want to thank personally in public Florida Crystals, who just came on yesterday.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Mrs. Whipple, I'm sorry, it's your turn.
I was actually going to say the exact same thing. I really think one of the keys to this process that we're going through of trying to get kids online is having our community partners in place. So huge thank you to Florida Crystals. I hope that they'll be an example for our other businesses in our community to really step up the way that they did, because it has just been a crazy thing, specifically in Ms. Andrews' communities, my communities, really seeing these kids that just have no hope to get online. It really means an absolute ton. So huge thank you to them and to other business partners who are stepping up.
Mr. Howard, I know we're probably jumping all over, and you probably have this in slides coming up, but you might want to, since we're talking about community partnerships, you advised me that the county's put out $10 million and you're working with Comcast. You want to bring the board up to speed on the conversations you and I had on that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, as you know, Palm Beach County has designated $10 million of CARES Act, but really the county's giving far more than that. That $10 million is to build the infrastructure for the wireless network, which includes the fiber optics and these Wi-Fi radios. But beyond that, they're in-kind services of all their staff time to survey really 50 square miles of real estate in Palm Beach County to engineer these networks has been extensive. And then beyond that, there's an additional $13 million that Ms. Baker has identified to support this project, where we have a gap of not being able to find a way to connect to some critical infrastructure to mount these Wi-Fi radios to street lights and power poles. So when that became an issue, the county found that money as well. Mr. Barbieri, does that kind of address that?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you for bringing them up to speed. And obviously it's a time to thank the county for partnering with us. I mean, that's $23 million that they're helping us with, plus all the time that they're putting in. So it's a good time to show that we have a great partnership with the county commissioners. So we thank them for their help. Dr. Sheffield, I guess we're back to you, or Mr. Oswald. I'm not sure where we're at. Sorry, we're skipping all over the place, and I've seen through the slides, so I know some of these issues are coming up later. But since we were talking about it here, it was a good time to finish it up. But Mr. Oswald, are you next, or back to Dr. Sheffield?
Now I have a few more slides that I'll be finishing up. And as I talked about earlier in regards to, and again, I have to continuously stress as it pertains to this plan being an overarching plan for the entire district. So as it pertains to being more specific and drilling down to the individual school, that happens at the school sites and within the regions. And what you're seeing here is that this is a sample of the daily schedule in which we've worked with our principals with. They have seen this before. This is something we've worked with throughout the year in regards to what a day would look like. Now, we put this up in regards to those suggested schedules. And again, in working with our principal supervisors, the regional offices. This is definitely not something that has been done in isolation, because we know how important it is to collaborate and work together as a team, because we all have have a common goal in mind, and that's wanting to do what's right for children. Here at the central office, we would love for all our students to be in brick and mortar. We all want that. But right now, with what we're dealing with, we know right now we are concerned about the health. That's most important right now. So this was a sample of the schedule in which was shared with our principals. Again, the teachers in which we worked with, and all those groups that I talked about earlier. And again, there is flexibility with these schedules. What's most important is around in regards to what are the components and what needs to be taking place around that live instruction. These are just some non-negotiables around those small group instructions, working with our students during III time. Even though that it's in that virtual space, these very strong, valuable components, they are still required and they will take place in that virtual space. I cannot stress enough. Is it going to replace the face-to-face? No, nothing will replace face-to-face, but this is what we're going to do during that virtual space. And when we go on to the next slide, which will be a sample of our secondary schedule, our middle is up top, and then senior high. We know in elementary is on a daily schedule by the day, and when we get to our middle and high school, there are by the individual periods. And it all goes back to the same in regards to what those components look like, what are the expectations, and how do we dig deep in terms of, again, trying to meet the students and provide the best instructional services in which we can provide and what we're given in our current space.
Dr. Sheffield, let me ask you a question, please. On the scheduling for the middle and high schools, are the students going to have the same login for each day for the same classes, or every day they're going to have to figure out what the new login is for example, in math classes? Is it always going to be the same login for a student? So every day that they have math, so that they don't have to continue to figure out what the login is going to be, so that
it would be the teacher will provide the students with their classroom code for that period.
Is it going to change every time?
No, it would not change every day. And part of this, Mr. Barbieri, and what I would say in terms of another piece, and I don't have it in here, is that when we talk about is what's different, is that Google has done some updates and some enhanced features in regards that it's going to also help as it pertains to us managing and not having to deal with some of those unwanted interferences in which we have dealt with. And what we're also going to be doing is providing some advocacy PD, not just for our students, but even for district staff, and as well for our students and parents in regards to what this space should look like in the expectations.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Whitfield, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, so super brief. I just wanted to say in this, I think there's one piece that was confusing to people that I talked to, which was under the place where it says student work. It says maybe small group instruction. I think what we really mean here, hopefully, if this is what I'm thinking it is will either be small group instruction, one-on-one instruction, so that it's known to the public that it is really an engaged time and not a free work or busy work time. I don't want people to think that that's
correct. You're correct, Ms. Whitfield.
Thank you. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that something that's really meant a lot to me in this time is the mental health of students and how difficult it is to not see your friends. And so I think one of the things that I really want to make sure is that teachers are checking in with their students during some point in the day, saying, how are you? How's it going? Give them a chance to chat with each other so that we can keep those connections alive. Because I think that that's a really important part of school, and we're not really addressing that specifically in this plan. And I know you all have talked about it with me, but I just wanted to say publicly how important I think that connection is.
Okay, thank you. And then as we move on to the next piece of this is that when we talk in regards to and holding tight and around the instructional delivery and how we wanted to bring together some strong pieces within this distance space, we knew that it was going to be important that we continue to develop and learned from what we went through within the spring, lessons learned. And from our lessons learned, we've been able to develop, the team have worked hard this summer in developing some ongoing professional development opportunities for our teachers. Now, when you look at this, you will see that there are 3 different levels. And the professional level, that's all around in terms of, what a teacher would need as it pertains to being very successful within this distance space. And also some areas around their content specific areas and so forth. Professional level 1, that's a requirement for all teachers. Every teacher here within the school district is going to go through that professional level 1 training and making certain that we know that they have those specifics in terms of what we see and know in terms of what they need within this space. Teachers also have an opportunity to continue on with that professional development track from the champion to level 2 and level 3. Now, because the professional level 1, it is mandatory, and what we have done to assist our teachers in terms of getting ahead and doing some work in this distance space over the summer, the team worked, and we were able to go ahead and go live with our professional development plan. This plan actually went live back on July 6th. When I say to you, and then to July 6th, and it was optional. It was optional. It was not mandatory because we know our teachers, they are enjoying their breaks. Many of them are working during the summers or what have you. But I can say to you, I'd asked Mrs. Fetterman for the number while we were meeting here this evening. And thus far, we just, within a week, and this being optional for our teachers, we have over 1,000 teachers that have already participated within this professional development opportunity. It will continue to grow. We are excited about it. Those teachers that were not able to participate during the summer, we will get those teachers during preschool. But will it stop during preschool after we're done with this training in regards to looking for ways within this space to continue to be there and provide the resources and support for our teachers? Absolutely not. That's our role. Now, and also as we talk about this, and just as if important as we know for us to be there to support our teachers, we also had a lesson learned is that we need to put in some professional development pieces and some trainings and some go-to for our parents and our students. So we have in this space under construction that we're working with now is the PD, the trainings that we will be releasing for our families as well in regards to how to navigate through this space and making certain that we are there to support them.
Ms. Brill.
Thank you. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that many of the teachers that I've been speaking to have been doing the personal development since it started in July, and they are extremely excited about going back virtually, and they feel that it's a robust program and that it's going to be extremely successful. So I just want to thank the teachers out there that have been able to avail themselves of the personal development, and thank staff because I'm hearing that it's been very well received, and I do want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Ms. Burrow, for the feedback. So in wrapping this up, again, this was just a very quick overview in regards to what we thought in terms of some of the pieces in which we needed to tighten and to work with the union on. And I just cannot thank Justin and his team in regarding to sitting down and working with us. And most importantly, the principals and the teachers, they've just been awesome. Again, we know that this is not the space that anyone would want to be in, but I can assure you the principals, the teachers, everyone have stepped outside of the box, and we are willing, we are ready, we are prepared to do what we have to do in this space. And we are anxiously, and we are ready to get back into brick and mortar, but we want to make certain that it is safe and within health reasons.
Dr. Robinson.
Yes, thank you. So I kind of saved mine up to go through this section. So first, I also want to thank staff and CTA because the notations under general teacher expectations actually cover a lot of the complaints that I heard during the distance learning 1.0, I guess we'll call it. And so I really do want to thank everyone for that. I want to let you know that there's, some community work has been done, specifically surveying some of our parents by some of our partners at Bridges. And the first wave of those surveys show that 70% or more of the parents want the school to communicate with them via text. And so I would like to make sure that we put whatever in place so that happens. It's important that we know how to reach people. Some of my friends I have to text, some I have to email, some I have to call. So we need to have the same kind of approach with parents. And so we need to support our teachers and school-based staff in being able to do that. Now, there was this article in the Palm Beach Post about the young man. I think he failed algebra because of lack of access. And I know these comments have been made, similar comments have been made by other board members, but I just want to add my voice to say that that's completely and utterly unacceptable. I thought we had kind of covered that in the changes we made before in the student progression plan. And so I would just ask that we make sure we do another look at that, because that just should not happen. I think that, and I'll talk about it more later under the internet access piece, but I think we should know how to remedy those situations. Okay, so now let's see. I'm going to also, I seconded the motion about the delaying the start of distance learning because there's a lot of things that I think need to happen during that preschool time. I think we need to have a longer preschool time than traditionally. And one of the things is that each teacher would find out the circumstances of the child in their class. Does that child have their device? Does that child have internet? And also during distance learning, who is the supportive adult? Because some children might be at the church. Some people might be at the Boys and Girls Club. Some children might be with grandma. So the teachers also need to know who is the adult that they need to communicate with in terms of supporting the child during distance learning. Okay, so then I want to go to the professional development plan. So I'm really pleased to see this. I want to add a few things, if you don't mind. First, we need to have, I don't know if it's technically professional development, but we need to have some education for all of our staff about this virus, because there's been so much information that appears to be conflicting. I think that we need to find the platform to educate all of our staff and also our parents, but right now I'm talking about our staff on this virus, right? So I'm gonna give you an example. We have had people who were afraid to go in buildings after they were closed for 4 months. It's no live virus in there. I'm just saying. So we need to do some education, right? So we need to figure that out. I think that some of these buckets that you have listed here might include some of the things I'm going to mention, but I want to call them out. We need to make sure that we're working on culturally responsive teaching. And specifically, we need to have some training for teachers and school-based administrators on how they respond to students and to each other after all these social upheavals that have occurred since we closed on March 13th, right? There's going to be a lot of young people and older people who need some assistance with processing their emotions around that. And so I think we need to be prepared for that. We need to talk to our teachers about sensitivities around distance learning. So this is one of the things that only an educator could have said this, is that if you're having distance learning and parents can see other children, there might be some sensitivity issues there, right? And that might be more if we go into a hybrid model, but just so that the teachers can tell us what the sensitive areas are, We also need to talk about protocols. So we will have to have protocols around responses to illness or perceived illness, and we will need to train staff on that. And so preschool is a good time for that. And then we need to also, I understand there was an outstanding PLA on microaggressions. We need to make sure that is included. And so, and the last thing I want to say at this point is just to back up what Mrs. Whitfield said. So we have layers of social emotional support. We have our behavioral health professionals, mental health professionals, case managers, and our co-located services. It seems to me that each of them is responsible for reaching out to the children at the school and checking on them. And if they already don't have that relationship, to establish that relationship so that child knows that there is, hopefully this is another caring adult that they can reach out to if they're having anxiety or concerns or whatever the problem is. And so we need to set some expectations for our social emotional staff, if you will. So thank you.
All right. I didn't see any more hands. Dr. Sheffield? Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. McCormick is going to come and talk about where we are.
Mr. Barbieri, my hand is up.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sanders, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. I just want to say, after we've had all these parents talking to us last week and this week, and I know that when you say that the PD for the parents and students is in development, it needs to be hurried, because we heard the disconnect that we have with our parents in our community, from our Wellington communities all the way to Boca, to Jupiter, the Glades, everywhere. We've got to begin to figure out how we have some communications. I know we sent the survey out, to find out what people were thinking. And as you know, we didn't get a lot of responses back, especially from some of our at-risk populations. But as I heard over these last 2 weeks, we haven't asked parents what their thoughts are and how we can help their children as we move through to this distance learning 2.0 that we're doing. So I know you're putting together a professional development plan for students and for parents, but it's an urgency right now to me, as I've been sitting here listening to parents talking to me as a board member and to all of you, that they feel so disconnected with us because of what happened to their children. And we can't just move on and get the plan to Tallahassee on the 31st and everybody's talking to the board. We better quickly find a way that we canvass, we phone call, we do some surveys, we do a whole lot to begin to talk to our parents as quickly as possible and find out from them what issues they're having as it relates to getting their children involved in this 2.0 distance learning.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Dr. Sheffield, are you finished?
Yes, Mr. McCormick is going to come on and talk about where we are as we're continuing to work with our ESC students. And then after Mr. McCormick, Harvey will come in with ELL. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Sheffield. Before I get into this slide, I need to take a moment to acknowledge our parents of students with disabilities, more specifically our parents who have children with disabilities that significantly impact their communication and functioning on a daily basis. From an educational and a service perspective, I need to say that we understand and we know that these are very challenging times. So as we prioritize the health and safety, we continue to remain focused on improving academics, services, and instruction. As a public school system, we recognize our responsibility to implement the principles of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, otherwise known as IDEA. We also recognize that we have students with disabilities who struggle being educated virtually. I have worked with staff to develop a detailed plan to describe how services will be provided and received while in distance learning. I assure you that we're committed to do our best And we will have our IEP teams convene to address any loss of skill and determine a plan to remediate. So as we go into the next slide, the information here outlines the guidelines received from the federal and state level. It is important to note that there have been no waivers for IDEA provided at this time. During distance learning, the Department of Exceptional Student Education has provided flexibility consistent with the federal and state guidance while collaborating with other school districts in our state and nationally through our partnership with the Council for the Great City Schools. We do this to innovate and continue to improve our standard of practice. Next slide. We have continued to screen and evaluate our children to the greatest extent possible through parent interviews, rating scales, observations, behavioral screenings, and through existing data provided by affiliates. For example, a student transitioning into our system at the age of 3 or 4, we work with Early Steps, Home Safe, and Head Start to assist with obtaining the information needed for the team to consider ESE eligibility and placement for services. We are also actively working with our national professional organizations of our speech and language pathologists and our school psychologists to be able to resume evaluating either virtually or hopefully face-to-face when appropriate. Next slide. IEP meetings have and will be conducted through Google Meets and by phone. If parents aren't comfortable with meeting virtually, we don't and won't proceed with meeting. And when IEP teams do convene, IEPs are written as if we are in school buildings. And on a side note, we have actually seen better participation from parents and staff. And in most cases, virtual meetings have proven to be more effective and efficient. Next slide.
Mr. McCormick, Mrs. McQuinn has a question.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't know it was come up that quickly. I was answering a parent's email, but I'm totally there. I was waiting until we got to, thank you, Mr. McCormick. Your parents love you, all the ones that communicate with me, and they're very pleased with what you're doing. And I'm speaking to North County Schools, so thank you for that. I did. Parent asked that I bring up 2 issues. One, regardless of when we open, to bring back kids to the buildings. In our reopening plan, it says that we state that ESE centers will open when we bring back K1, 6, and 9. But she was requesting that we also bring back ESE cluster sites. So that's one. You don't have to answer me now. And the other that was even more pressing, which is immediate, is that evaluations for students who have been waiting for their evaluations to come into for our special needs children. I realize I'm stammering. I'm looking at my handwritten notes. She wants to know how will ESE evaluations be completed, because many students have been waiting since March, and that would be the more pressing of the issues for right now. Thanks.
Mr. Oswald, do you want to address the first one, or you want me to?
On the first question, Ms. McQuinn, I'll be talking about the phase-in approach shortly, so I could address it at that time, a rationale to that process. And I'll let Mr. McCormick talk to the second question.
So, and of course, the second question was?
In terms of the students getting evaluations.
Yeah. And like we mentioned in the slide just prior to this, it's tough because a lot of our evaluations right now are normed in a face-to-face manner. So the validity of evaluations at this point with our diagnosticians doing it virtually is completely minimized, and it's very difficult to make educational decisions, especially when you're talking about making a child eligible for a disability, and then to determine services based on an evaluation that wasn't normed. We really need to caution as we move forward. I assure you, we're working with our other counties in the state to be able to figure out how they're doing it. Right now, people are they're trying to figure it out, but even our publishers at this point are struggling to establish a format for us to be able to conduct these evaluations in an acceptable manner to be able to be used for decision making. So we plan on getting back up and running as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Sorry, just really quickly, I've had some parents ask me, when you mention the IEPs, are you also indicating gifted children, or is it not including them?
Yes, we are implementing gifted services while in distance learning. So yes, and we are conducting meetings. If we receive evaluations that were done prior to the pandemic, we are considering, we're actually considering any evaluation we receive at this time that parents provide us. And then we move forward and consider the data in that evaluation the best way we can to make the best decisions we can for the students at this time.
Vice Chairman Shaw, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. On trying to deliver these services, and we've had discussion about how employees been used and the number of paras that we have in our special education classes. Have you had any discussions on how we can use those paras either virtually or actually in live meetings with some of our special needs students in an effective way so that they would receive a more intense program?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, actually, we took the last couple months of the school year to train. We had over 700 paraprofessionals in their own Google Classroom, so we could establish training for them to be able to build their skills in this digital world. So part of what we envision is using that training in their newfound skills to be able to help coach both parents and students to be able to get into the system and benefit from it more, but also provide that one-on-one or direct connect for students with disabilities to be able to make sure that we're doing all we can for them at this time to better engage them in the academic process, the teaching and learning process.
Okay, is there any, and with some of our more medically fragile students and real complex issues, how are we going to be addressing services to those students?
So that particular group of students, I'm very concerned about, and especially when we transition back into the school building, because they have significant medical complexities. I'm concerned of the repercussions if infection happens. But so that's one part of it. The other part of it is while in distance learning, we had an opportunity over ESY to be able to set a whole new standard for providing service to our students with disabilities. We required live service on a daily basis. We required lessons recorded on a daily basis. And the feedback we got, specifically even from our administrator over at Royal Palm School, is that she saw better participation from all of those students who participated in the live lessons. So that alone will help improve the level of service. The other aspect of that, Mr. Shaw, is making sure that there are people at home to assist us in making sure that they're engaged in that process. Specifically for our students with significant medical issues, a lot of them are linked up with Medicaid services or agencies for persons with disabilities. We collaborate with those agencies to make sure we team up with them. So while we're educating, they're supporting on the home side, so we can try to, improve outcomes.
Okay, and then just a quick follow-up. And how will we address the issue of students who have various kinds of assistive technology to make sure that that equipment is available? And how would that be monitored at the home in the event that there's some service needed and those kinds of things?
Great question. We have a very knowledgeable and dedicated assistive technology team. They know where every single device is, and our data systems track where all those devices are. So at the beginning of the year, even at the beginning, right after March 13th, we made sure that all the devices got to the kids, that they weren't stuck at the school. So we will be working with that team of professionals to make sure that each and every child is using their accessibility, their digital tools, their AAC, augmentative adaptive communication devices for those students who have a difficult time communicating and need a device to do that. We have a team that is willing and able to be able to go and consistently not only update the devices, but train the parents and caregivers on how to assist in utilizing it. And that's a huge benefit for our students and families to be sure that it transcends beyond the educational process and gets more into their daily living and allows the people around them to interact with them better.
And how will we provide for speech therapy, OT, and PT?
So speech therapy, it's accepted in the practice, teletherapy. So we're actually, in some cases, prior to this point, we've had students made significant progress. Other students did not access the live therapy. We are fully committed to make sure that minutes of live therapy, especially with speech and language pathologists, is provided to each and every student who has that on their IEP. For occupational and physical therapy, it's a little different because their goals are typically to access school in their school campus. So occupational therapy, it's holding a pencil, it's writing. That's more of direct physical touch and contact. I've seen videos of our providers where they model for the students, they model for the parents, and they coach that way. In our physical therapists, it's orientation and mobility a lot of the times where it's standing and moving and positioning. And a lot of our families have, if they get PT at school, a lot of our families get PT at home as well. So it's important for our PT service providers from our system work with the PT service providers in the home. And if there isn't one, we're working directly, one way or the other, we're working directly with the parent or caregiver to make sure we maximize the service the best way we can. I'm going to go ahead on with this last slide. Thank you. So we look forward to a more robust district.
McCormick, Ms. Brill has her hand up. I'm sorry.
No problem.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. McCormick, but first thing I want to do is thank you very much because I get so much positive feedback from everyone regarding your efforts. And I do have a few questions. I don't know that you'd be covering these in the next slides, but the first, I want to say that we do need to examine the IEPs to make sure that they can be implemented with the goals as they are. I know my son in his early years had goals that could not be done through distance learning. My first question for you is, what about students with 504 plans? They're not mentioned in this. Are you treating them the same as the ESC students?
So treating as the same as implementing the plan, yes. And the reason why they're not mentioned here is because typically the 504 plans are more of accommodations, and we do expect that all accommodations are provided as they would be for students with accommodations on their IEP. And if there is any related service, we also comply with those services as well. Accommodations, and I am going to get into that quite a bit in this next slide, is sometimes, it's different, but we can provide it. We promote a lot universal design for learning. And what's happening here in the space of digital learning is we're leveraging technology of which all students benefit from, especially our students with 504s and IEPs. And they don't look so different anymore. And most didn't before, but they don't look so different anymore because everybody is getting this type of accommodation through these digital tools.
Okay, my next question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but I wondered how we're going to serve our ESC students who can't access digital learning due to their disability, not just our medically fragile students, but is there an opportunity maybe to leverage hospital homebound type services You mentioned, for example, for PT, if we wind up having to be distance learning for a long period of time, can we look into leveraging services like hospital homebound?
My goal is for each and every IEP to be reviewed as we come into this next school year and continue to be reviewed in an ongoing manner throughout the year. So each service provider will have that conversation with the parent. And as we get into the slide, to define that distance learning plan, because we're not essentially saying we're implementing the IEP as written if we were in brick and mortar schools. We're doing the best we can in this distance learning model to be able to provide their education in the best way possible while students are home safe. So can we think of other ways to be able to go above and beyond and provide service? We work every day with our local and national partners to be able to figure out ways to do that while keeping everybody safe. And just speaking with staff, speaking with their supervisors, people want to be able to support their students. They're looking forward to the days that we can go back and see our kids again and watch them progress. And there are some kids that are benefiting. I'm not saying all of them are. Please know I'm not saying all are. But there are some kids that are. And for those who aren't, we're doing the best we can at this time.
Thank you. And I think it's important that parents know that there will be the opportunity for compensatory services where we have not been able to meet the students' needs in the manner we're going back. And my last question, and I know that we're going to be discussing the return to brick and mortar later in the presentation, but with regard to ESE specifically, how are we protecting staff and students when we do open up at our programs for our most profoundly disabled students? For example, at Royal Palm School, what is the plan to protect the teachers there?
Well, the teachers and the students, right? So we are currently working to order PPE. And when we order the PPE, we are trying to make sure that the PPE allows for accessibility, because a lot of our students, especially our students that don't communicate well, watch facial expressions and they respond to facial expressions. So the PPE we're looking, or in the process of ordering, allows for that to happen. So there's a lot of thought going into that. There's a lot of work going into that. And, when we go back, we plan on doing it in a safe manner with our staff and students, safety and health in mind.
Ms. Brill, if I could add, this is one of the areas, and Kevin has been great. He's been on a lot of national calls with me. No one across this country is completely figured out special ed. But our health advisory committee was very clear also around the level of PPE in schools like Royal Palm, considering diaper changes, intubations, all of those things that happen in those spaces. And so Kevin and I, Mr. Burke and Dr. Sheffield, I must have been several weeks ago, we really talked about ordering a significant number of PPE, similar to what you would actually see in hospitals for those particular spaces.
Thank you both. I'm done.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. This is just a matter of protocol. I think we need a motion to extend the meeting. It's been a long time since we've been here.
Are you making the motion, Dr. Robinson?
I'm making the motion to extend the meeting until 11 p.m.
We have a second. Motion fails for lack of a second. Meeting's adjourned? No, I guess I can't.
Meeting's adjourned.
Mrs. Andrews seconded the motion. All in favor? Opposed? We're here for another hour. Motion carries 7-0.
So as we transition into this next slide, I do, Ms. McQuinn, Ms. Brill, thank you for the accolades, but this job can't be done in isolation. We have a massive team of ESE service providers and administrators that are very passionate about what they do and the impact of what they do to the students. So as we look forward to move into a more robust digital learning model of programming while in distance learning, each teacher will receive each student will receive a distance learning plan defined by the parent or caregiver and each service provider. So the distance learning plan documents the collaboration with the family to provide ongoing service to students. These supports will be in place while the students are in distance learning in home during this pandemic and does not represent a change in the IEP. All services will be provided via live Google Meets. Although we recognize that students with disabilities will also benefit from recorded lessons to allow for learning on their own schedule, for lessons to review content in order to move forward to content mastery or skill-based mastery. And they're also used for differentiated learning. Students also have the opportunity to break out into, from the whole group lesson into small group activities or individualized instruction. Students will have access to the same lessons and content as if they were in school buildings. You all know that we are fully leveraging our Google Suite with the extensions and accessibility features to provide accommodations, progress monitoring, and to present content. So as we utilize these features to enhance collaboration between ESE service providers and the general education teachers. So all of this wouldn't be possible without the support and collaboration of our parents and caregivers in our community as we continue to support them through their method of communication, which could be virtual office hours, video training, emails, texts, phone calls, or video chats to support the success and outcomes of our students with disabilities.
Good evening. So as when we think about our English language learners, there are, just like in the ESC side, we have federal and state requirements that govern our work with English language learners, specifically providing instruction that's comprehensible for ELLs at their language proficiency that is equal and comparable to other students. So we, just like our ESC team, are committed to ensuring that our ELLs have the services and that they need and deserve in order to be successful in this distance learning environment. So as we go to the next slide, we have received some guidance from our federal and state agencies over the programs that around the services and how to provide them in a virtual environment. The guidance that has been provided for both Title III for ELLs and for Title I-C for our migrant programs, we are using to just ensure that we are in compliance and following all, emergency orders and things of that nature to make sure that we are living up to our district ELL plan with the ultimate goal of providing quality instruction for our English language learners. Additionally, we have been working in collaboration with our other districts around us to make sure that we are working in collaboration with them and with the Council of Great City Schools on best practices for ELLs in a distance learning environment. So specifically, as we talk about services, our goal is to ensure that the instructional programs support English language development. We will be offering all 4 models that we currently have in brick and mortar, so sheltered services, collaborative, mainstream, and our dual language programs, but they'll all be done in an online format. Each model, of course, will be hyper-focused on oral language development through literacy or the content, or oral language development through mathematics or social studies, whatever the content may be as well, to ensure that our students English language skills are addressed, developed, and improved ongoing. We will also be providing guidance to schools regarding, go back one more, sorry, just our funded positions. So for example, in a brick and mortar, if we had an ESOL teacher who was collaborating with a mainstream teacher, we would have those same expectations in the online environments where the teachers would be co-teaching together, co-planning, providing language scaffolds, and ensuring that our ESOL students have different services. In the same way, our CLFs, we are asking them to come back and they will be providing language support, not only for our students, but for our families as well, as part of their work to ensure that our families have access to information and that they're ready to also help support their students. As you heard earlier, we have the family development videos, and those trainings, we'll be translating those into multiple languages. So there's lots of access for our families all throughout our county. One thing that we do know specifically is that our newcomer and our beginning English speakers, they need different support. That's one thing that we've learned. And we actually, this summer, in our summer programs, we targeted newcomers and beginning English speakers, and we found new and effective ways to engage and support them in their language development. And so our team is taking all of those learnings and are creating professional development specifically around how to support newcomers at all levels and beginning speakers in this learning environment. And we will provide different language platforms as well, and in similar ways providing things at home such as native language dictionaries or glossaries so that we can make sure that all accommodations and modifications are also met for our students. We are also working with our community partners to really engage and make sure that the different areas within our district, the different language groups, the different needs are being met specifically to those areas. So that they can, the schools have what they need from our team to make sure that they're ready for success. And so then as we think about compliance, just like our ESE teams, we also have various components of compliance from initial entry to the program, progress monitoring, and then exiting of our program. Some of these requirements have been amended through some of the emergency orders from federal and state guidance, and we're going to be adhering to those, of course. We are lucky, we do have the access scores from the spring that will allow us to place students appropriately in the correct classes as we begin the fall semester. And we will be creating distance learning plans in addition with the students' ELL plans to make sure that we're meeting their individual needs. We're also going to be progress monitoring very closely for any language regression. If students happen to have fallen back, we'll be monitoring that very closely. You'll see some of that in those assurances. And so we'll be making sure that we have plans for that for each of our students as well. And then in regards to exiting the program, we are still working with the state and our other partners to determine how we do that effectively. You have to have a language score and a reading assessment. And as you know, we did not have the FSA reading, so we don't have that assessment at this time. So we will be working through that. But our overall objective, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say our overall objective is to make sure that our students have high quality language instruction so they can continue to be proficient and moving forward academically.
As we prepare for distance learning, we know that the infrastructure is critical. So I think the board is aware that we're preparing to implement a one-to-one mobile computing project, and with the goal to ensure that every teacher and every student has access to a device with a camera for distance learning. As you know, we have over 60,000 student Chromebooks that we've loaned out to families, and each of our teachers should have the appropriate equipment as well. Over 12,000 devices have been distributed to teachers. That leaves the district with a current inventory. As you can see on the slide, it says 32,000. We received about 3,000 devices back from our seniors, so that current inventory of 35,000 devices. We are meeting with principals on Monday to talk about a distribution plan and timeline for getting those other devices out into the hands of our students, and using an equity lens and a prioritization process identified by the regionals. In addition to that, we're preparing to make a purchase of an additional 66,000 student Chromebooks, including another 2,000 that will be purchased by the Ed Foundation. And then we're pretty pleased with this. We've also identified a CTE laptop to meet the needs of our CTE programs, and we're making the purchase of about 14,000 of those student CTE laptops for a total of an additional 82,000 student devices for an investment of $25 million. We mentioned earlier, we're expecting those to begin delivery on August the 17th. As you guys know, there's worldwide supply chain challenges right now. A lot of these things are in demand. What we have been promised is 10,000 units per week beginning August 17th, so we'll be working with the regional superintendents on a prioritization process as those come in. On June 10th, we did a board workshop talking about the digital divide and the digital inclusion. So I have a couple of updates on the strategies that we identified then. I mentioned earlier that we had a significant donation of 450 hotspots to our students in the Glades to support summer learning. And all of that was community funded by the United Way to Town of Palm Beach, United Way of Palm Beach County, and the Quantum Foundation. In addition to that, the Children's Services Council has stepped up and will be providing at least 1,200 families a sponsored Internet Essentials, and they'll be targeting our Families and Our Bridges program. Next slide, please. In addition to that, the board is aware of the municipal Wi-Fi project that we've engaged in with the county with the CARES Act dollars. A lot of work has taken place that I just want to quickly outline for you, and then I know that you'll have questions around this. We've identified the county has more than 60 schools where they would like to broadcast a signal from our education network towers. We are working on the agreement with Palm Beach County. We'll be bringing to the board an interlocal agreement. In order to start the work in the next couple of weeks, we'll be entering a right of entry agreement with the subcontractors that the superintendent will sign. We've also, at Mr. Shaw's recommendation, taken this to the countywide intergovernmental forum to escalate to the countywide issues forum. We had success with that, so this will be coming to the countywide issues forum. In addition to that, we've had engagements with and presentations to these various cities and municipalities, Lake Worth, Lantana, Belglade, Pahokee, and so forth. We've also spoken with Eric Hall, who's the president of the Quantum Foundation, at the recommendation of Dr. Robinson, and I'm really pleased to say that they will be providing some leadership to bring the public and private partners around the table to help solve this problem and organize the community around these challenges. There has been significant progress by the county in some of the fiber work out in the Glades. If you want to go to the next slide, Mr. Oswald.
Mark, real quick, I believe that with the Quantum Foundation, that's Eric Kelly.
Oh, I apologize. I'm not even sure what I said, so I apologize. Yes, Eric Kelly. Thanks, Dr. Fenoy. In this municipal Wi-Fi project, there are really these kind of three distinct phases, and we're wrapping up this first phase. And as I mentioned earlier, the county engineers and so forth have surveyed about 50 square miles, including our school campuses, to kind of prioritize and map these networks out. They're doing the deployment, some of the deployment now with some of the fiber work. That work will be going on for the next few months to begin installing the radios and on the towers. And then we believe in late August, we'll begin the implementation where these networks will begin coming online as we identify the families, hand out these Wi-Fi extenders, and do the training. This is just an illustration of what it is that this enormous project is undertaking. Miles of fiber optic cable, and every instance possible, we're leveraging resources that were already available, that the county assets or other, the district and others have. So we will use, as I said, over 60 of our school sites to mount these route radios, and then throughout the communities, mount these other mesh radios to kind of broadcast this signal to get it into the home. As we look across the communities, and as you know, the CARES dollars need to be spent by December, the end of December. The first two communities that will begin to come online in that August timeframe, late August, early September, are the Glades community and Lake Worth Beach. We are approximating that would provide service to approximately 7,500 students or families. And then after that, the phasing looks like the Riviera Beach and the north end of West Palm and Pleasant City. And then in the third phase, the remainder of those communities. So this really kind of encapsulates this investment Mr. Barbieri alluded to, which is really from the county of at least $20 million. The district's previous investment of 60,000 Chromebooks plus this additional 25 million. And then our community partners who already donated over $680,000 in laptops to the Ed Foundation, 120,000 for hotspots and Comcast sponsorships. And then we believe that we'll be embarking on a campaign with the Ed Foundation to kind of set a goal and raise money towards these Wi-Fi extenders as our long-term solution. What's not captured here is what we've been working on over the last several days, and that is to kind of control our own destiny, use some of our own dollars, and provide a short-term solution with Comcast sponsorships and hotspots to cover anywhere from 15 to 20,000 students. We'll be going into meetings tomorrow with Comcast and T-Mobile to kind of bring that back to the board, and our timeline for implementation is 4 to 6 weeks. There may have been things that I didn't mention, but Mr. Oswald, if either you or Mr. Burke have anything to add, and then we can open for questions.
Vice Chairman Shaw, you have a question?
For temporary hotspot providing for that, do we have any options on, could we use school buses as a way to be equipped to handle that delivery of the Wi-Fi into areas on a temporary basis? I know that Comcast, I understand, has some mobile Wi-Fi hotspot equipment. So has that been discussed?
Yes, sir. Wanda Paul and her team have equipped 50 of our school buses with Wi-Fi. It's a project that will roll out later this month. Those have a range of about 300 feet and 100 connections. So we kind of have that in our back pocket. There are a lot of logistical challenges with that. So we're kind of working through that process. And Ms. Paul's on, she may know some additional information about those buses.
All right, and truthfully, that answers my question, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, thank you. So, well, thank you for this good work. It's definitely needed. So, and I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Howard or somebody else, but don't we know which students never logged on and which students logged on rarely? Like, don't we now have a centralized database that you guys can pull and see the names of those children and the notations about when the principal or school-based staff reached out to them to try to engage them? Do we have that?
Mr. Oswald, you want to take that?
Go ahead, Mr. Howard.
Dr. Robinson, fair question. In May, we identified the students who had, on average, logged in fewer than 2 times a week. We call these our underengaged students. We took those students and pushed out a form to our schools that required them to contact each of the students. And we identified 4 to 6 potential barriers, and asked them to get information and identify what those barriers were and try to resolve them with the family and then share that data back with us so we had some sense if there were things that we could tackle at scale behind the scenes. There were 14,000 or so of those students. We eliminated the seniors because this started in March, but when we got down, we had about 12,500 students. About 7,500 of those were in elementary and roughly 5,000 in secondary. And what we found were that, 2 of the most common issues were a device and internet access. About 10% of the kids indicated, there was, the barrier, the teachers indicated the barrier was a device. About 17 to 19% of the kids, the barrier was internet. In some instances, it was having good contact information with the family to really reach out and support. And then one of the questions that we asked, and one of the interesting things that we learned from that was about 30 to 35% of the students were identified that the home environment was a barrier. And so we know that there's more training needed for parents and more resources available to provide a suitable learning environment in the home. Some of those barriers, such as the device and the internet access and the contact information, we feel like, we're bringing a solution to bear at scale on that. Some of those others that I didn't mention were whether the student had moved, which was about 5% of the students, and then whether the utilities were an issue. We had heard anecdotally that for a number of these types of students who were mobile and had other challenges in the home, that the utilities might be an issue. And about 7%, the teachers indicated that about 7% of the students, there was a utilities barrier. So I think we have a fair snapshot on that. And, our advocacy was then for the schools to follow up, but certainly there's a piece here at the district that we have to help provide the resources to solve for that.
Well, thank you for that. But does your database show which students, for example, the 7% where utilities were issued, can you pull that up? Do you have names?
We know who those students are by name. School knows who those students are by name.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great.
Some of this information we will be providing. We have kids that will be going to the next school, going up, matriculating up a grade level or changing schools. So part of our plan is to share this information with that next school so they know the students' challenge.
And Dr. Robinson, you talked about targeting through an equity lens. We will cross-reference that list, and those students who are furthest behind grade level will be targeted to receive the first set of devices, the first set of, if it was internet issue. So if partnering with Comcast, we'll get a list of the sponsorships that families can call. So we'll give our principals a set of these sponsorships so they can quickly turn it around much quicker than where we left off last semester.
Okay, that's fantastic, Mr. Oswald. You knew what my next question was, so
Yes, I did.
I'll leave that alone. And so the only other question I have on this, because I think that you really have done a fantastic job, and I really do want to thank all of our community partners and Palm Beach County for assisting with this. But how about this? Our cell phones are with Sprint. Sprint has hotspots. Did we ask Sprint to give us some hotspots?
Yeah, we've negotiated with Sprint. They didn't give us any, but we negotiated with Sprint. We're negotiating with T-Mobile, AT&T, and Comcast. So
that's not a good look, huh?
It's not.
I'm just saying, when is that contract up? I think, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done with that. Thank you.
I agree with you, Dr. Robinson. Mr. Howard and I had that same discussion yesterday. It's like, he told me we spend a little over $1 million a year with Sprint. So certainly they can be a good partner here and help us out with some of these kids.
I will mention that, we've worked closely with Mike's team, Mike Burke and Deepak and Darcy in purchasing, and everybody's been at the table to kind of champion the district in this instance. So should be proud of the work, I think, that my colleagues have done in this area.
Vice Chairman Shaw, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a comment. And this goes back a long time ago when the original cable franchise agreements were negotiated in Palm Beach County. That creation of making available the education channel, the governmental channel, and some of the local channels, that was part of the entire original franchise. I don't know how much of that is still active and appropriate, but that may be some leverage that we have in dealing with this issue. And if I can, and this goes into another thing, and we don't need to get into a big discussion on this one, but the one thing that I've not heard any discussion on, and there was nothing in the presentation is, and you can get back to me or just or in the board on this one. I see nothing about our adult education programs, and I would like to know what options and how we're dealing with our adult education programs. And from my perspective, I think this is something that could probably just be handled administratively, because I think that the issues with adult ed are so different than some of the things we're talking about tonight. But I do want to see some kind of information on how we're going to address our adult education programs. Thank you.
And Mr. Shaw, we will bring that back. We expect some further guidance from the Department of Education regarding adult education. Mr. Barbieri, if it's all right, I'm going to go ahead and move forward in the presentation.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
So we talked about the DOE order and the executive order earlier, so I'm going to go past these slides. You can come back to them if necessary. So at this time, I really want to pivot towards how do we move forward to get back to bricks and mortar schools. And a lot of the conversation was about distance learning, now about how we move forward. And again, moving forward is really talking about using metrics. And with that, really going back to the governor's reopening plan for Florida. So there's 3 specific areas of metrics that the governor is relying on to go from one phase to the next for the reopening plan. So syndromic surveillance, epidemiology, outbreak and decline, and healthcare capability. So within each of those, in the first set, is to see a downward trajectory of influenza-like illnesses or COVID-like illnesses. So here where we're monitoring fevers, coughs, etc., to see a downward trend there. Then the second set is what we talk about often, the number of COVID-19 cases, and then the percent positive. So one or the other there, that there's a downward trend within those. And the last set is really the healthcare capabilities. So the number of beds so that we can serve our patients that are COVID, and then also a robust testing in place for Palm Beach County. So at the time when the Superintendent's Health Advisory Committee met, we were meeting 2 of 5 of those. So what we're proposing is to take these particular metrics back to the Superintendent's Health Advisory Committee to monitor these particular areas to see potentially the 14-day trend of COVID-19 cases decline. So these are the areas that the governor is using, and then each of these to work with the Superintendent's Health Advisory Committee to advise us when we go into the next phase. So based off those metrics, again, that would take us into what we're calling stage 2 in a moment. But at this time, we will be sending a questionnaire out to our parents to find out when we do go back to bricks and mortar, who wants to remain in a distance learning environment and who wants to come back to the buildings. So that will go out to our families next week.
Dr. Robinson, you have a question? Go ahead.
I do. It's more of a comment because I think it's critically important that we have to establish some, I'm going to call them assurances, since that was on the previous page, assurances for our families and our staff before we can ask them if you are coming back, right? And I think that we might discuss some of these things later, but I'm just saying when we ask that question, we have to say, if we're doing social distancing and frequent hand washing and face coverings and whatever, list, the frequent wipe downs at a high touch area, like list those things. If we're doing these things, will you come back? We cannot ask just this question, will you send your kid back? Or as a teacher, will you come back? That unqualified, I just look at you like you've lost your mind. I mean, we have to put our assurances and then ask the question. So thank you.
Yes, and the questionnaire does account for the CDC guidelines, including the social distancing, the wearing of facial coverings, et cetera, in the questionnaire.
Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield, do you have a question or comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been interested about this. I think that when we send out this survey, it should be really clear about what phase 1 is, what phase 2 is, and asking families if they'll come back then, like Dr. Robinson said, with the assurances. But I also think just explaining what that means to people when we say, would you be willing to come back? And I don't know if we're going to get to see the survey before it goes out this time. I'd really, really like to, so we can understand, like, I just think if I could have a chance to take it, and we could have a few people take it and make sure that it actually makes sense, because I really want to know the answer to not only how many teachers will come back, how many families would come back, and then what stage they're comfortable coming back in, because I think that that's really going to affect our decision making going forward. And then with all of these things you just mentioned, these benchmarks, I would love to understand if there's a number that's associated with it. I'd love to see that in some documentation somewhere.
We have a couple questions for you, Mr. Oswald. First, Ms. Brill, and then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And this is more a suggestion, and you don't have to answer now when it would go out. I was going to bring this up when we got to, I guess it's slide 45. But not only should we survey the parents, as been said by Dr. Robinson and Ms. Whitfield, and also the teachers, but we really need to survey all our employees, meaning bus drivers and all staff, just to find out where we are in terms of our numbers, because we can't look at opening up if we don't know who's going to be back. And someone has to determine how teachers, which teachers are able to stay on, if any of them can stay on just virtual due to health reasons or whatever. So I know you probably can't answer this question at this time, but I do think that we owe it to everybody employed by the school district to find out how they feel and whether they do intend to go back to their position.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. We do intend to survey as well. Hopefully that will go out next week as well. All employees as well. And then to Ms. Whitfield's question, we'll work to contact board members who are interested to see the survey. We do want to do that quickly so that we can get that out hopefully by next week. So,
Mr. Oswald, that's important because the last survey was so confusing. Parents are telling us they didn't have any clue how to answer some of that stuff. So it's got to be pretty straightforward because we're going to run out of time if we have to do another survey after that survey. Mrs. Andrews, you were next.
Yeah, and I think we have to utilize different modalities. Everybody doesn't have a computer, so you're going to send it out. You sent it out last time, you only had 13% of the African American, 20% of Hispanic. You have to kind of utilize different modalities. By the telephone, do some canvassing so that you can get the input from everybody, because it was not a good thing last time. You didn't have everybody. So you got to do better.
Absolutely. We have a number of strategies in place to increase the percent. Also, it will be tied specifically to a family's information. We do, as much as possible, want to go through the portal. We're going to be utilizing and going over this with our principals tomorrow so that our principals will be pushing out messages and controlling a lot of this as well. And then in real time, getting that data back to principals of who has not responded. But yes, we agree with you, Ms. Andrews, on that piece.
Go ahead, Mr. Oswald. That's it for the questions at this point.
Okay, so once we enter into, if we meet those metrics that we're talking about and enter into phase 2, according to the governor's plan, then we would start these stages of implementation. So stage 1 for the school district is what we're calling is where everybody starts off in the distance learning environment. So in this stage, we will initiate the questionnaire, but we are speeding that up to start that as soon as possible. Also, we're going to continuously monitor those metrics and those health conditions on a weekly basis to look for those trends. So to Ms. Whitfield's question about what those metrics are. So looking for that 14-day decrease in the number of positive cases. The hospital beds, they look for I think it's 30% of availability to treat the patients. So in stage 2, when we go into that phase 2 is when we begin to open up our bricks and mortar. So we are recommended to take a phased-in approach where we start with pre-K, K1, 6, and 9. The rationale behind that are these are transition years for these particular students. So they're getting used to a new facility for the majority of these students. In addition, our principals, our teachers are going to have a heavy lift ahead of them as we recondition and renorm our schools under these CDC guidelines to allow for the social distancing, for
Mr.
the wearing.
I'm sorry, Mr. Oswald. I didn't know if I have a couple board members who wanted to ask questions. I don't know where you're at on the slide, but if we could take a couple questions right now, Ms. McQuinn and then Ms. Brill.
I am just reiterating Mrs. Whitfield's question in terms of the metrics for us to, I think a survey won't help parents unless we attach a numerical value to the metrics. Thank you.
Doing tonight without enough.
Ms. Brill, you were next. I'm sorry. Then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And I believe that Mr. Oswald was talking about stage 2 as you came back, and somebody mentioned cluster sites going in at stage 2. I don't know if that's what you mean by the ESC centers. Probably not, but I do support them going back if possible. And then we've all received a lot of emails and had conversations about seniors. Our seniors, this is going to be their last year in high school. So I really would like to hear from the superintendent about, I would like to see the 12th graders have an opportunity to go back right away because there's so many things that have to be done in their senior year. And this is their last year with us. So to the superintendent, if you could tell us, is it possible to add grade 12 and also the cluster sites?
Yeah, I mean, anything is possible. The question is we need to go back to the team and evaluate what that means. So I'm not going to say I'm going to do that today because, our original thought was transitional years. 9th graders have never been on that campus. 6th graders have never been on that campus. Kindergartens and 1st graders typically haven't been on that campus. So, and then that's why you have the 2-week intervals to bring them in. But everything about this process and the reason why we're doing it in public is for the discussion. But we have to be able to phase. And then also remember, phasing it in is the only way we can actually control how many kids are in the building. And so phasing that in will allow us to see who's actually coming, who isn't coming, if there's a transmission of the disease, blah, blah, blah. So that is something that we would definitely consider. That was actually an idea we tossed around, but I think the way the deputy superintendent's team has created it allows us to get there. But everything is subject to change once we start moving.
Right. And just as a follow-up, Mr. Barbieri, to Dr. Fenoy, I appreciate that. I think once we know the number of students that are going to go back, and from the seniors, you'll be able to better analyze it. But you've really answered my overall question, and that is that as we approve this today, this is a work in progress. So this isn't carved in stone, and that you will get back to us on these suggestions.
I would argue to the board that there's not a superintendent in the country that has a finalized plan. It does not exist, and let's be clear, we could have presented you a plan 3 weeks ago. And then last Monday, all of that would have went out the window. So we have to be honest around there are external factors that neither you or I can control, but we must react to it.
Go ahead, Mr. Oswald.
Okay, so in regards to the ESC centers.
I'm sorry, Mr. Oswald, Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And we heard a lot of parents tonight talk about this, and I know this is an issue with many of our employees. When we begin to stagger into the different stages, you've got you're going to be bringing some teachers back, and their children might be on virtual distance learning. So we've got to kind of think about that. And then you had some parents talking about maybe their child was going to go back, and then the other one would be left at home. So that's an issue. So when you're talking about surveying parents about what they want to do, if they're having any obstacles about any of this that we're talking about, hopefully there's going to be a line there that they can tell you what their concerns are so that we can try to address them. We may not be able to meet everybody's needs, but we need to know what kinds of conditions and trouble that's bothering people. Because when they read this, they saw that maybe they had 3 kids in their house, or it could be an instructor that had to come back and they didn't know what to do. So there should be a little line in there, a little paragraph. What's your issues as it relates to coming back and doing this plan? So I hope you know what I'm talking about, because we heard a lot of people talk about that tonight.
Mr. Oswald, I have a couple questions for you also. For an example, AP, Mrs. Andrews, thank you. AP biology, we have a 9th grader, a 10th grader, and an 11th grader in there. The 9th grader is back in his classroom. The 10th and 11th haven't come back yet. How are we going to deal with a class like that? That's my first question. I'll give you the second one after you answer that.
So in that situation, we can use the technology, our interactive flat panels, our smart boards that are in the classroom. So there can be some students who are in the classroom, in a Google Classroom, and then some of the students who are physically present. So basically, where some districts, you're turning the camera on in the classroom, and some students are there physically, some of them are in there through the Google Classroom.
All right, and then how are seniors and juniors able to access school counselors if they're not back on the campus yet? They've got to have college applications ready for November, SAT, ACT testing, et cetera. Are they going to be able to, before they get back on the campus, are they going to be able to contact counselors? Are the counselors going to be available for those kids?
Yeah, so counselors will be back working, and they will be working with those students. There's been a lot of work that I know that the school counseling team here at the school district has been working for outreach in this distance learning environment as well. So we can bring back more information on that.
Yeah, that's important. A lot of the parents have been emailing me if they have kids that are trying to apply for colleges. There's also the question, they weren't able to take the SAT exams at the end of last year because they were canceled. Now we're scheduling them for, I guess, College Board has them for August and September. Are we going to make our facilities available for those kids to take the tests in August?
We are having conversations right now with College Board regarding opening up our facilities. We're at the time, we're just reviewing their guidelines around social distancing and what we can provide in a safe environment. So we're looking at that. We're going to do our best to ensure that we offer that. We know that's critical for our families to offer that SAT test and ACT.
Okay, because a couple of the parents said there's some private sites that they can go and get the testing, and they don't want to miss the opportunity to reserve those spaces if we're not going to have a place for their kids in August. So can you get back to us as soon as possible on that one?
Yes, I've heard from many families regarding that concern as well.
Okay, Mrs. Whitfield, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had an idea. So my understanding is the reason why we have certain groups coming back in the first stage and certain groups coming back in the second stage is based on trying to make sure that we don't overload the system at one point or another. We don't want to make it so that we have so many students that show up and we don't have the number of teachers for that. So one of the things I would propose is that we, on a school by school basis, not that you have to publish this, have the principals know how many teachers they would need for stage one. And then if the appropriate number of students don't show up for that, then without waiting those 2 weeks, we could open to another group within that school. So like Ms. Brill said, we could bring back the cluster sites on the early end if we knew there was some space, because I agree that the clusters to me are just a huge important group of kids that need to get that face-to-face time if at all humanly possible. So maybe rather than saying this group then that group and this grade then that grade, we say in this priority order, this is how many students we can handle in stage one, and then in stage two, and then in stage three. Does that make sense? I don't know if that'll help.
Yes, absolutely. We'll take that back and review it. And as Dr. Fenoy mentioned,
I think we will review that, but Ms. Whitfield, I want to be very clear about something. These will not be static numbers. So what I mean by that is, if there's an outbreak in a school, then the number you had of teachers yesterday will not be the same today. And so I think we have to be so the reason why I appreciate the academic team putting the 2 week window in, because it's a benchmark. We will, every 2 weeks, we will, but listen, we control, if there's a school that has no kids, we can always say, hey, you guys go now. The 2-week window is the standard, the minimum standard. We can adjust everything else, but it gives parents some sort of, and I'm speaking as a parent, it gives us some sort of benchmark to know when should we start thinking about that? Because even the 2-week window could be extended if there's an uptick in cases or there's no teachers for the kids to go in there. So we have to just set this standard right now, and you're the board. I'm the superintendent. We can adjust it as we deal with it in real time. Everything we're doing right now is speculation. Everything. Because we cannot control COVID. So I just wanted to put that out there, is that this is an external factor. This is the variable we can't control. But setting timelines, adjusting it, and all that kind of stuff, I just want to be clear with the board. If we need to do something earlier, we can do it. We're the board.
All right, Mr. Barbieri he lost the connection. So let's go ahead from here. It is 10:55 and we had the 11 o'clock. So what is the pleasure of the board, and either an extension or try to come up with how we want to close out by 11? So it looks like Mr. Barbieri, are you back?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. I just asked him what's the pleasure. We're at 10:55, and what's the pleasure of the board? Do they want to extend, or do they want to come up with something to close out with the items? I know that we had Mrs. McQuinn's issue that she wanted to discuss, so the board needs to make some direction on that.
So does the board want to extend the meeting for another hour, half an hour, whatever it takes? So we need a motion. Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, I make motion for 1 more hour.
Second by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? Any in favor? Opposed? Reluctantly? We'll go on for another hour. Go ahead, Mr. Osmond. Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Certainly.
So then within each of these stages mentioned, there's a 2-week window we would phase in. In stage 3, we would add in face-to-face for grades 2, 3, 7, and 10. Again, and I'll be speaking to in a moment, just regarding the lift that our school centers have ahead of them to reconfigure space so that we can ensure that the CDC guidelines are being followed regarding social distancing and the new norms of how we use our facilities. And in stage 4, again, we will have all students that for families who choose to go back to our bricks and mortars, face-to-face with instruction, and we will continue to monitor the health conditions that are happening here locally in Palm Beach County. This is just a visual of what those staging looks like, and I appreciate the board's feedback regarding how we roll that out. So during stage 1, essentially, we're in stage 1 now. There's a lot of work that's going to be happening, as mentioned, at the school center. So our principals are working on getting ready to, we talked a lot about distribution of devices, taking devices in. All of that is getting in place to start to execute at this time. In particular, kindergarten is going to be a big one. But across numerous grade levels, we have a number of consumable books that would have to be distributed. So all of these plans will be worked on at this time. Also, there's a lot of safety protocols that have been developed over the last 4 months. So those are school principals. We're working with their staff to ensure that all staff are following those protocols. Again, monitoring health condition. We talked about the questionnaire, that timeline, and another slide, I have it for next week, depending on the feedback we get from the board. We may need to push that back slightly. Registration process for our students, registration has been slow. There's been a virtual registration, but to finalize that, principals would need to be scheduling appointments for families to come in to finish that registration process. We need to make sure that we're doing that in a safe way. In a few moments, Ms. Paula will be speaking about some of the adjustments that we'll be making into the facilities. We will be reducing the number of visitors and parents on a school campus without an appointment, again, to ensure safety is being followed. So again, in phase 2, the questionnaire will be going out. In addition, we talked about the staff survey that will also be going out. School principals, based on what they see in that data of how many families are going to choose to come back in bricks and mortars, are going to be doing a lot of work on their campuses to recondition it under these new guidelines. And that's a big piece of this right now. How they use classrooms, hallways, large facilities, all of those will be taken into consideration of how they're used in a new way. And a big piece is we're going to be informing our parents, students, and staff regarding the requirements of social distancing guidelines, including the use of facial coverings, which will be required for when our students, from the time they get on our buses and then throughout the day for both staff and students throughout the day. We are working to ensure that we have the facial coverings for all of our staff and working on that for our students as well. And at this time, Ms. Paul will talk about some of the operational work that's happening in the district.
Good afternoon, board members. Good to see y'all. So the first part of our operations support plan for phase 2 is, I'll start with the maintenance department. As you know, our maintenance department has been working all summer. They've not stopped. One of the things that we're going to do, among many, is provide additional signage in the common areas and areas throughout the campus, as well as our ancillary facilities. We've started a plexiglass installation in our common areas and district facilities, and we have ordered quite a bit more to accommodate our campuses. We have distributed PPE, personal protective equipment, to our employees, and we will assist as needed to distribute that equipment throughout the district, to include facial coverings. On the custodial side, we are utilizing enhanced cleaning protocols. I want to mention that the cleaning products that we use pass the district's strict safety standards, and those set by the EPA. So the chemicals and cleaning products we used are approved products. We will monitor custodial supplies to make sure that all the campuses have what they need. We will continue to clean and stock restrooms on increased rotations, so we need to make sure that we keep our eyes on that. We will need teachers to assist with frequently touched areas between classes, as well as our custodial staff. So this is, it'll take a village to do all these things that we need to do. We will continue our monthly building inspections to make sure that the buildings are meeting the standards that we've set. We will continue to train our custodians and bus drivers on our disinfecting procedures. And if we can go to the next slide. Our environmental department has been working again all summer. They will continue to respond to incidents of reported cases in the district schools and facilities. They will assist in designating a quarantine room or space as needed. They'll work very closely, as they've done all summer, with the campus principals to designate these spaces. They will coordinate enhanced cleaning with vendors as needed. And we've done that also this summer, throughout the summer. They will help provide sanitizing supplies and protocols to schools and ancillary facilities as needed. They will also continue to monitor and investigate indoor air quality concerns. Our food service department has worked all summer to provide the support the summer feeding program. So they will continue to support feeding our precious students. Meals will be served in the cafeteria and consumed in the cafeteria or classroom, utilizing social distancing. No touch IDs and facial coverings to include face shields for staff. We had a community member donate quite a few face shields to the district, and that was very useful during the summer feeding program, and our employees, food service employees will continue to use those, and we've ordered more. So that was a huge help. We will continue the grab and go food service for distance learners. So we will continue that program. And again, additional signage for social distancing in the cafeteria and areas. And then also daily enhanced cleaning. Let's talk about transportation for a moment. We have electrostatic sprayers. We've ordered more. This helps us to quickly disinfect the buses. Bus drivers will wipe down high-touch surfaces and hard surfaces on buses between routes. The regular routes will be followed and adjusted as needed for actual ridership as we ramp up to starting school and fully occupying our buildings. Social distancing as much as possible and as much as feasible on our buses. Use of facial coverings are required on all of our buses. And then I believe Mr. Howard spoke previously about the 50 buses that we are equipping with Wi-Fi to increase connectivity in select neighborhoods as we can. And I believe he mentioned the range of 300 feet for those and 100 connections that's possible. That's a pretty exciting program that we've been working on for quite a while. And then the other part is student registration for our bus transportation. We're currently running a pilot program, and we hope to fully roll it out with the new school year. School police, they will continue to fully staff each school to comply with Senate Bill 7026 and Senate Bill 7030. They will continue with all safety initiatives and support social distancing. And they will provide continued coordination through our Tactical Operations Center. All police personnel will be utilizing appropriate PPE and social distancing measures. So that's what I have from the operations support side. Thank you very much.
This is Paul. I'd like to ask you a question, and maybe you covered it while I was trying to figure out what was going on with my computer. Are we putting anything on the teachers' desks in the classrooms? Did you cover that? Or is there going to be plexiglass on the teachers' desks?
So we're going to start with all of the common areas. We've ordered a lot of plexiglass, and we'll continue to that process. So we'll start there, and then as more comes in, we'll continue to try to evolve that to other areas of the school.
Okay, I saw 3 hands. First, Mrs. Whitfield, then Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you so much. Ms. Paul, I think you said good afternoon when you started. I wanted to correct you on that. I just thought it was...
I'm sorry, good morning. Good morning.
All right, that's where we're headed right now. So a couple of things. The first one, obviously, I'm always obsessed with food service and how we're going to feed our kids. One of the things that has come to my attention that I wanted to bring forward here is the concerns about some of the rules that the USDA has around our ability to service kids during both distance learning and during hybrid education options, and just making sure that if at all possible, we can ask our state and federal leaders to really make those changes that are necessary to make sure that we are able to serve a student no matter if their home school is really, really far away from where they live. If their school that they're going to is far away from where they live, that's a big concern for me. And then also making sure that we're able to service those virtual learning students, even if we go back into the hybrid time. So that's been huge. I've been trying to talk to some leaders myself, but since we're on a call with so many people watching, I just want to point that out and make sure that if you know anyone, you can help us with that. The question I had for you was around the indoor air quality concerns. I had a parent write me and say, aren't all our air conditioning systems interconnected, and can we be reasonably assured that, we're not passing them around disease around the school when we get back? Is that something that we can even attempt to mitigate, or is that just too difficult?
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with our maintenance director, Stacy Marshall, as well as our environmental director, Paul Strauss. And they have been working very vigilantly to make sure that we meet the specifications of changing filters as required by the manufacturers. But one of the things that we're looking at is what would be the cost to change them more frequent across the district. We're a large district, and so that's something that we're currently working on. And of course, we need to work with our finance chief, Mr. Burke, to see if that's even economically possible for us at this time. But that's one of the things that Mr. Strauss does. He helps us monitor the indoor air quality. He has an amazing team. And so when we have these issues, we're very aggressive about trying to deal with them.
Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. Ms. Paul, what about the professional development for your custodians, your bus drivers, and others? I just know that usually at the beginning of each year they have training, but with all of these new initiatives in place, what kind of professional development are they getting?
We have worked with our communications department to develop videos for them to watch and to train. And then they've also had some training via a computer, but I can give you a list of that. And then they'll go through their normal training that we do every year. And it may be computer based, but certain things where they have to perhaps take a dexterity test or something like that, we have been calling them in to do that, to fulfill those requirements.
Let me just follow up with that, because I've just heard there have been some concerns with that, especially with computer access for the training that they've been offered. And the last question would be with the police who are stationed at the schools. How are they going to help us with some of the new initiatives that we're trying to do and getting things done? I mean, what are they doing?
Well, they've worked throughout the summer to support the summer feeding program at our various over 50 plus campuses. In addition to that, they've been doing their own training that they normally would do. So they have been intricately involved in everything that we've done in terms of trying to ramp up to the start of school. So I can provide that through Chief Kitzrow, a list of some of the trainings that they've already accomplished and what the plan is going forward.
I just wanted to say one thing to the board. We're also in communication with SEIU on this. Back to Ms. Whitfield's. I'm sorry, it's late. Ms. Andrews' statement about our training, and so working with SEIU and Ms. Paul and her team have done a great job. But they are going to be helping us with all of these changes and communicating with their employees as well, the ones that aren't at work right now. So they are also committed to helping us make sure that the SEIU employees get all the training that they need as well.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. First, I have some questions for Mrs. Paul, and then I'm going to need to go back to Mr. Oswald because I was raising my hand before without realizing my camera was off. So for Mrs. Paul, first, would you just provide us with some follow-up information regarding the types of air conditioning filters that are most protective? I'm assuming that your staff, Mr. Strauss, probably has this answer on the tip of his tongue from his research, but it concerns me because, one of the many things that's unknown about this virus or has yet to be proven is to what degree aerosolized virus can cause infection. And so I suspect that we need more than the usual filters, but that's not my area of expertise. So I would just like to have that follow-up information. I would ask that we look at, and I don't know if I missed this, but that we ask bus drivers to deliver meals in both phase 1 and phase 2.
So we are currently, Dr. Robinson, working with the two departments. There's been much discussion on that opportunity to keep our bus drivers engaged, and we will bring that back to you at a later date. But we are working through that right now.
Okay, and then under food service, I'm going to ask you to reconsider this. Meals will be served in the cafeteria and consumed in the cafeteria or classroom, utilizing social distancing. I don't think that that's best practice. From what I've read, I could be wrong, but from what I've read, the recommendation is that students stay in their classroom and the meals are brought to them. So I'm gonna just ask for you to double check that and to reconsider. I mean, I know I read that, so I'm gonna just ask that you reconsider that. And then the other thing is in terms of the bus drivers. One of the speakers, I think it was a bus driver, said something about suggesting like plexiglass enclosement with a door or something. I don't know if that's the only way, but what I do know is that the bus in this pandemic is the scariest place in my mind because it's, basically enclosed, and I don't know how many children we're going to have on there, and each and every one of them passes the bus driver. It's just frightening. And I know that I read somewhere about suggesting that windows are always open on the bus. I don't need to micromanage that piece, but I do want you to come back with some more information on how we're going to protect the bus drivers. And actually the children on the bus. I mean, they could be lower risk of getting infected, but they can't get infected. And I would like to make sure that we're taking additional precautions in that closed-in space. So, and now if I could go back to Mr. Oswald's presentations on the reopening plan. Is he there? There we are. Yep. So I'm on page 43, and I'm sorry that I missed the opportunity to ask these things at the appropriate time. But so first I want to clarify something. So our going into stage 2 for us will only happen after Palm Beach County goes into phase 2. Is that correct? Is that what we understand?
That is correct. We're going to take those metrics that were discussed to the superintendent's health advisory committee to use them and ask them for guidance in that process as well.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, so based on, all these reopening plans that I've read, we're in phase 1. So let's just hypothetically, if we thought that the numbers were good enough to start having children go back into the school building, but the governor had not moved Palm Beach County into phase 2, based on documents out of Tallahassee and Washington, we would not bring children back into the building. We would have to get the governor to say, yes, the Palm Beach County is in phase 2.
That is correct, based off his set of rules and his reopening plan.
Okay, because the phase 2 and stage 2 kind of started getting mixed up in my head. So the other thing I think we need to make sure that we ask the health advisory committee is how long we should be. So say we're in stage 2. How long should we monitor the data before we go into stage 3? Okay, so I don't need to get into that in too much detail. So I'll just leave that alone. And then the last thing that I want to ask you to consider, as I'm sure we're going to be tweaking this along the way. So, and I do appreciate the thoughtfulness with how you want to bring students back into school. I want us to look a little bit deeper into equity issues and to consider, I'm just giving this as food for thought, consider in stage 2, bringing in students who never logged in the spring. So basically they've had, 2 complete months of learning loss, like documented, right? Maybe possibly all students with IEPs, maybe possibly English language learners, and maybe possibly underperforming students. I'm just asking you to consider that as part of your phase 2, looking at it with an equity lens. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mrs. McQuinn, go ahead.
Okay. I added another question while thanking Dr. Robinson for the clarification between phase 2 and our stage 2. And I think if we had the question, our parents probably have the question too. So we'll probably need to clarify that down the line, but I get it. It's Palm Beach County School District stage 2. My comment, and it's not for now, it is for future planning when we entered our stage 2, has to do with our bus drivers. They have enough trouble enforcing just minor infraction issues on school buses. It's going to have to be figured out how they can monitor students wearing their masks on buses. Our poor bus drivers, and I do want to thank the bus drivers for such respectful, positive feedback to us tonight also. But the mask situation in terms of them monitoring it is problematic.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaw. Microphone, Mr. Shaw.
I thought I turned it on. Mr. Oswald, I got an email from a teacher that I'm sure you all have addressed this, but I'll just read it. Most high school classes are mixed classes, and many of them don't have smart boards yet. All electives are mixed and don't have the board. So what is your response? How are you all handling that issue? Because that has to be, some of the teachers listening, that has to be an important question for them.
Yeah, and if Mr. Howard's here as well. So all of our elementary and middle schools classrooms will be equipped with a smart flat panel board in those. We may have to, in some of our classrooms, with the inventory that's on our high school campuses, shift from one teacher to the next, or possibly shift from one school to the next. The flat panels from some of our elementary middle schools that would not be being used at that time, and prioritize based on those mixed grade levels based on a particular course. In addition, the flat panels for our high schools are due to come in this fall. Mr. Howard, are you still there?
Yes, sir. We have currently 511 interactive flat panels and technology trailblazer classrooms in the high school. Another 2,200, I believe, are what we were looking to expedite. Every media center has an 86-inch flat panel in every school. So we have 511. So you're right. There are, in each of the Trailblazer classrooms, there would be a flat panel on a high school campus. And we're looking to kind of work with the vendor to expedite getting more of those in by maybe the November timeframe.
All right, Ms. Brill, you were next, and then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. And just further to that discussion before I bring up my other issue is that with the mixed grades in classrooms in high school, you know, ideally when we go back, and I would hope that it's before November, that when we have live classrooms, it will address the mixed grades so that the students that aren't brought back yet will have access to the classroom. But if we don't have the smart boards, and the camera technology, that's not going to happen. I just wanted to return on slide 48. I know Dr. Robinson brought up to Mrs. Paul that we should look at whether students should be eating in their classrooms. And I just want to point out that many of our high schools have re-engineered cafeterias. So that's not going to be possible. And also the high school students can also, when the weather is permitting, eat out in the courtyard. So I think that the high schools need to be treated differently, and particularly when they are re-engineered schools. There's no way you can deliver the meals from the re-engineered schools when there's choices to be made. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield.
So similar to Mrs. McQuinn, I don't necessarily need an answer to this now, but I do think that we need to, as a board, address the mask issue and what role our police are going to play in that, how they're going to work with a student who's not wearing a mask, who may have forgotten a mask. Are we going to supply a mask in the event that they don't have one? I think before we get into stage 2 for ourselves, we need to know what our policy is going to be, because I want that to be uniform across the county. Make sure that we know how best to deal with a student in that situation and what our internal school district policy is going to be around them.
Yeah, that's a big concern. I know I'm hearing from principals, and being a former principal, that I would be concerned as well for noncompliance. We are working to equip, our projection is to give each of our students 5 washable facial coverings. In addition, a stack of disposable facial coverings at the school center for our principals, for those students who forget or do not have one, to the use of this new routine, so that they would have a mask available to them. And then we will iron out the Q&A. Obviously, it's the big issue many districts are grappling with on all the details. In addition, and also the medical, there are some, Dr. Alonso spoke to those particular students who may have a medical issue. Mr. Burke has ordered a large number of shields to be used.
Dr. Robinson, and then Mrs. McQuinn.
Thank you. So 2 things. First, let me start with that one. So I personally think that we should use face shields more often than masks, right? And I think that, one, because I believe they provide more protection. I can defend that later. But the other thing is that they're washable. So, like, I don't know what we're going to do with these masks at the end of the school day, right? But if in my mind, and maybe this is not practical, but in my mind, you could take the shields, each child washes off their own shield, and they hang it up. Their name is written on the front of it, whatever. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But let me go back to the other issue about high school, and then the cafeteria, and it kind of it goes into the issue with the bus drivers too. So this is one of the basic premises in safety in this pandemic is isolation, right? And so what you want to do is you want to have as little commingling as possible. So you want to have children, it's easy to think of it in elementary school. You want them to stay in their class with their group. And part of the reason for that is not only limited exposure, but if somebody's positive or if somebody's family member is positive, you don't have to go wondering about everybody in the school. You know who that child was around. Now, the thought that made me raise my hand is, in high school, I don't know how we do that, but I'm telling you it's important, right? So the research would suggest that as you get older, your risk for infection increases. It would suggest, I want to be really clear, right? The research would suggest, right? Or observations would suggest, which means that then the high school students really are even more of a concern than the kindergarten students. If all this stuff we think we see from China and Italy and every place bears out to be true. So I'm putting all my disclaimers in there. So, but high schools, the students move around and change classes. I don't have the answer. We have to figure that out, but because we can't do all that commingling. It's a disaster. It's just a recipe for infection, right? I mean, and as we watch the median age of infection in Palm Beach County go down, I mean, I don't have any reason to think it's going to get down to 16, but we watch it go down, and that's from socializing. And what are high school kids going to do? I mean, I'm just saying we have to plan to keep them safe. And part of that plan has to include isolation. And I hadn't thought about the redesigned cafeterias, but guess what? In the hospital, they bring you a little order sheet the day before and you can order whatever it is you want. We have to figure it out because all this conversation we're having is about health and safety. And I'm telling you, this is a significant health and safety issue in high school. It's real messy. I don't have an answer. I'm asking you guys to put that on your figure it out list because, you know, middle school too, but high school just is really, some of our high schools are bigger than some towns. So, you know, just please keep that like high on your radar. Thank you.
Mrs. McQuinn?
Mine is quick, but I feel really strongly about this. Knowing we are one of the few school districts in the country that have our own school police force. And all they are trained specifically to work with our kids, it would, in my mind, be a travesty for our school police to deal with face mask issues. That is an administrative issue. If finally a principal can't handle an unruly kid, then fine, they can ask for police backup. But let's not get into our school police doing an administrative duty because we will have way too many kids in trouble.
I don't see any other hands, Mr. Oswald, if you want to continue quickly.
You guys can hang in there, 2 more slides and we're finishing off with the one and only Claudia Shea.
Hi, everyone. Last 2 slides. I'll do them really quickly. Anyway, you've heard so much information tonight, and of course, it's the role of communications to share all of that out in bite-sized pieces. So tomorrow morning, you'll be seeing on our website much of what we talked about in just quick FAQs for our parents, just making it really understandable. And just want to let you know the interest in everything that you're saying today. When this meeting started out, we had almost 9,000 people watching just online. That's without the TV station. So, and then you heard the passion from all those people speaking to you, so you know the interest. And so it's just really wonderful that you've taken so long and so much time with everyone's questions and considerations. But I just want to assure you that my team, so that's the Education Network and Communications, will continue to do the best that we can to engage all of our parents and our staff and our students on our multiple levels of media, you know, whether it be through our newsletters or, as Dr. Robinson said earlier, texting is the thing for us. We always text out before these meetings and say, you know, watch, and all of a sudden, that's why we have all these thousands of people, because we do find if we can tell our parents and our staff something in 142 characters or fewer, we're going to get a lot of bang for our dollar. So that is something, Dr. Robinson, thank you, but we do utilize that quite a lot. I want to remind you also that everything we put out in 3 and increasingly 4 languages. We're adding Portuguese much more often now. And I just want to remind everybody, again, of all the various platforms. So if we still have parents awake with us right now, we just want them to know that they're going to be getting all of this information continually in a timely fashion. So I would just remind everyone to visit palmbeachschools.org continually. If you go there, we make the URLs really easy. There's a palmbeachschools.org / feeding sites, or there's another one about reopening schools. And, you know, so we just have all of this information there, summer programs, virtual field trips, registering for school, anything that you need, how we clean our schools, all of that is right there. So I encourage our families just to really pay close attention to our websites if they can, also accessible on your smartphone. Dr. Fenoy, of course, keeps in contact with our parents, usually through video messages or emails. And I'm pretty sure that Dr. Fenoy asked me about sending out an email to all parents and all staff tomorrow morning. So that will pretty much deal with everything that you discussed in a bite-sized amount. tomorrow. So we'll be sending that out. Of course, the board members will be seeing that first. Live streaming is what we're doing right now. Everyone can always watch us stream live on palmbeachschools.org or Comcast 235 or AT&T Uverse. And again, that has just become so incredibly popular. Want to point out, too, that our phone bank was really, really important. So when we closed down our schools on March 13th, we knew we were going to have a lot of questions. So I believe it was on March 11th or 12th, Dr. Fenoy allowed us to open up phone banks, and multicultural and transportation really helped us out there. We set up in the back of the cafeteria. We were several feet apart, and we had hundreds upon hundreds of phone calls over the next 3 weeks. And IT with their service desk was tremendously helpful too. They handled all the computer questions, the device questions, but we handled everything from where do I go for a feeding site to how do I even get a device to I'm afraid to start distance learning. I don't even know how to log in. How do I find my child's ID number, which is still a big consideration. So that's another one of those very short stories that we're going to be putting out in the next couple of days. 30, 40-second story about here's how you find your child's student ID. Because if you don't have that, you can't get into the portal and you're just stopped, dead in your tracks. So we're going to be sending out all of that information. And then Mr. Oswald, if you can go to the next slide, which is the final slide in the entire deck. Newsletters, I'm sure you're aware, Communications puts out 4 newsletters every week. We put out The Source, which is for all of our parents. We put out The Link, which is for our employees. We put out a Haitian Creole and a Spanish newsletter. So that's 4 every week. Social media has just gone crazy. We hired a new employee. We stole her from Channel 5 about a year and a half ago. And she has just, our social media numbers are going crazy. And in fact, it's been so important because that's where we get all of our questions. And that's sort of how we know how to direct our messaging. We'll get, hundreds of questions on this. And so we devote stories to that. Or we change our website to reflect those kind of questions and answers. So it's just been a tremendous source for connecting with the public. Again, generating videos, we continue to show your Penny at Work, the tremendous work that Wanda and her team are doing with sanitizing the buses and the schools, everything that we're doing with the technology end of it. I'm so tremendously excited that those communication towers that 10 operates on the school district campuses that Mr. Howard referenced earlier, 61 of them, we're starting with 3, which are going to be equipped with the radio equipment on top because of that partnership with the county. So we'll be able to put out free Wi-Fi into at least 3 communities to start with the hope of over the year incorporating 61 of those. So that's just, I'm so excited to see those polls have some use again. Parent Link, that's how we send out all of our messaging to our parents and our staff. As I mentioned, the texting, the calling, the emailing, and all of that is done in 4 languages as well. And then the YouTube channel. So last week we had a technical difficulty. So we said, okay, this week we're having no technical difficulties. We're going to have 2 channels of YouTube audio. So if we have a problem with one of our links, we're just going to switch over to the other one. Then we took a lightning hit. So, so that got us. So, no good deed goes unpunished. But anyway, so we hope next week when you have your meeting to have a perfect meeting. Hopefully it won't go this long. And we hope to have no technical difficulties. But I want you to know that I encourage all of you to call me directly anytime you would like to see more of anything from communications or you think there's a way to step up our job. I know Dr. Robinson is really, really pushing for more community involvement for us to get out in the community because a lot of people aren't connected. And again, that's something that we are 100% on board with. So again, any ideas you have or recommendations, I can't wait to hear them.
Vice Chairman Shaw.
Thank you. I don't need an answer today, but I would like Mr. Oswald, if you all can give us a response. How are we going to do training of substitutes that may be needed during the year? And how are we going to do training of brand new teachers that may come in at the last minute? So again, don't need an answer now, but I think it's an important one that we need to have some idea on what will happen with them.
Mr. Oswald, I don't remember if it was you or Mrs. Paul, but when one of the board members brought up the issue of the masks on the buses, I presume that when we first start, we're not going to have so many kids that we need to have all the buses out there. So maybe we can double up the bus drivers. So bus drivers acting as like the watchdog on the bus, an extra bus driver on the bus. so that they can make sure the kids keep their masks on the bus. So it's something you might want to consider, since we might have some extra bus drivers at that point. Board members, that's the end of Mr. Oswald's presentation, but we have to go back to the motions that are on the floor. Mrs. Whitfield, did you have something you wanted to add? Go ahead.
Just kind of a procedural question. I know Mrs. McQuinn had put an amendment, and we are going to vote on accepting this presentation, but we had 3.5 hours of comments from the board members. So I'm curious to Dr. Fenoy, how will you incorporate those suggestions and tweaks in there if we were to vote on this as it stands?
Well, the same way we did last week. So we took 5 hours of notes last week, and we made adjustments based on that feedback. And so not every suggestion that the board has come up with we can probably do, because there's a lot, and a lot of you have varying opinions on the same subject. But we'll investigate everything we can. The good news is, for at least another month or so, we still have Ms. Rico, so she's going to make sure everything's in order. So we've stuck to that commitment, and she and I are still on the same page. So we'll look at that. But I think even some of your suggestions will change next week when new information comes out. So that we have to be honest around the fluidity. But when I tell you I'm so proud of the team, so I hope it's abundantly clear to everyone after meeting till midnight that we've been working on this all summer. And so now it's time to put the pieces together. It's time to look at the rest of the science, really talk to you guys, talk to our parents some more. But I want all of us to be clear. Whatever you vote on tonight will be basically the framework, because we're going to have to keep tweaking it until we get to the launching site. And that's just the reality. So we will take all this information and we would make all the applicable changes with our legal team where necessary. And we'll talk about it as a team.
Mrs. Rico, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to clarify on the board item, so you are approving the plan. I think I heard somebody say accept. You're approving the plan, and then you are delegating to the superintendent the authority to implement as necessary. Now, as we talked about throughout the evening, there are a number of areas and items that we talked about, policies needing to be implemented. Those will come back to you for implementation, or any items that the board has the authority to vote on. So I just wanted to make that clear in terms of what you were actually voting on. Thank you.
Mrs. McQuinn.
So before we get back to the my proposed amendment, I simply want to make it clear that the plan, obviously we want to be back to bricks and mortar. The plan itself, with tweaks and implementation issues, is a very good plan. And I so much appreciate that. It will be the superintendent's job to make sure that that's implemented with input that we're getting from parents and teachers, all employees, in fact. So I just want to make it very clear that the plan, knowing that we will start virtually, is a really good plan. My concern is the fact that my concern is the technology. We lost so many students before. So I'm very concerned. I think it's Mr. Barbieri who said at one point, we're running out of time. We are running out of time. And I don't know how we can afford to start instruction when we don't have the technology ready. Thank you. I'll be quiet now.
So, Mrs. McQuinn, so during the meeting tonight, between everything that's going on, I had an opportunity to speak with the superintendent and with Mr. Tierney, who spoke with Mr. Burke. So it appears as though there's no issue with starting school on the 24th of August. It's problematic if we move it to September. And the other problem is that we're not so sure, based on the governor's order, that if we put September on there, that he's not going to kick it back to us because his order said something about August. The other issue is, and I was the one that said about technology and we're running out of time, I will not agree to start this district in virtual until I am sure that every single child out there, because those are the neediest children that don't have the technology. I don't want to start up until we're sure. So tonight there's been some representations that we're getting these computers in, and all these hotspots are going to be available, and Comcast is working with us on whatever. But I've told the superintendent that I don't feel comfortable, and I'm sure none of you do, that we start the school year with any of those children not able to connect with us, without able to connect with their teachers. So I'm hopeful that before we actually, the start of the school year, whatever day we pick, that the superintendent will come back to us and tell us that they've contacted every one of those students that had no contact, and we now know that they have the ability to connect with us. I think I saw Dr. Robinson. Go ahead, Mrs. McQuinn. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to know, if necessary, I can amend my own amendment to be the 31st. I think that that's still in August, and that's Monday, to comply with DOE. So just know that I will be happy to change that to August 31st.
I can second that.
Mr. Superintendent, is August 31st going to work for you? You've got to prove this because we're changing your recommendation.
Well, I mean, obviously, I would be most comfortable with the 24th. Because we have not discussed as a board your own calendar committee. Are we waiving that? Like, I don't want to put y'all in a situation that we have to back out of it. So my team right now is telling me the 24th is what we're most comfortable with.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you. And I also, I would like to start as late as possible. I am concerned about a pay gap for our employees. So I do think that the 24th would be more feasible. I am worried, Mr. Barbieri, about getting technology into all of our students' hands. I really, in my gut, feel that we're still going to lose people. We're still going to lose children. But I also know that we cannot go back to brick and mortar. So, I would feel comfortable with amending the recommendation to the 24th.
So let me just, I understand, but again, personally, and you're going to all vote on it, so you're going to vote the way you want, and I'm only one vote, but I don't feel comfortable. I mean, those are the children that need us the most. Those are the kids in the Glades and Riviera Beach and Delray that have no connection. I mean, there's no way that it's how can you in good conscience want to start the school year when you have children that can't connect? Now, I suggested to the superintendent that we have those children out there and we only have, maybe we identify a couple thousand of them that still don't have connection. Maybe we can bring those children into wherever places we can get them into some of the schools if possible, and isolate them so that there's 5 kids in a classroom with teachers. But I just don't feel comfortable doing that. The other thing is, I understand that as long as we have these people working, if they're in training or the bus drivers are helping clean schools or whatever, that they get paid. So the issue is not a pay gap. The issue is, where's Mr. Burke going to get the money? Is he going to take it out of reserve? Is he going to use some of the CARES funds? But as long as we have people working, we can pay them. I mean, the pay gap comes when you have, Mike Burke has always explained to us that you can't pay people if they're not working. So as long as we have them working on something, training or whatever, my understanding is that they can be paid. So the only question then is, Mr. Superintendent, where do we get the money? Mrs. Brill, and then
Mr. Chairman, can I make this suggestion? Because the idea of September 8th just came to us like now, could we not just bring this back to you next week? I mean, either way, so I'm very open to delaying the start of the school year, but let us make sure we give you the right information to make the right decision. So let me suggest that I bring you an item back next week, a recommendation, and then we work with you guys over the course of the week to tell you all of the consequences for whatever decision is made. So that way I can commit to getting it done next week. I just don't feel comfortable with our research during a meeting. I just don't feel comfortable with that.
All right. I mean, if Mrs. McQuinn wants to withdraw a motion, my only concern is, I mean, we've told everybody in the world that we're going to make a decision tonight, and everybody's expecting when is school going to start, and now we're telling them we're going to tell them next week. So I get it. We don't have the answers tonight, but I mean, I would have preferred to make sure that all the parents out there they keep emailing us about when school's going to start. Now we're going to tell them next week. So I think we can assure the parents.
Say what I said. If you guys make a motion for the 24th, I will accept that motion. Anything beyond that, you got to give our team and the legal team time to make sure that we're giving you the right information.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. McQuinn. It's your
Okay.
motion.
Okay, so I hear Dr. Fenoy loud and clear. Dr. Fenoy, instead of consequences, I think we're looking at opportunities. But I right now I can't live for, so our parents know we've heard them, and I see hands waving, so I am more inclined to withdraw my recommendation than to move. I've already yielded a week, can't do another one.
Okay, so you're withdrawing your motion to Dr. I saw a couple hands. Did somebody else want to speak on this now that she's withdrawn the motion? Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, I just want to make sure from Mr. Burke, if we went to the 31st, is that going to be an issue with getting people paid? I still think that needs to be clear for me.
Good evening. I'm glad I got the opportunity to speak. I sent an email to the board today in preparation of this conversation. And what I found was that really a 1 week shift to August 17th was manageable without disrupting people's pay. And that we could work around it. Anything beyond that is likely going to have some pay gaps. We're going to try to get creative. The biggest group, if you looked at my email, the August 24th scenario, we had over 17,000 people experience a pay gap. Now, I understand in this environment, a pay gap for employees may not be the primary concern. But I wanted everyone to go in it with their eyes open. There may be some creative things we can do with the teachers around their preschool days, if we want to space those days out to keep them working and get those paychecks rolling. I think that's a possibility. But that will not work for everybody. We've got some employees that only work 182 days a year, and they don't have the luxury of preschool days, to work with. We have other employees that have already started back for the school year. And what that may lead to is that, they're going to work their contracted duty days and finish up late May, early June, and our school year may run to mid-June or late June, depending on the ultimate calendar. So I don't want to gloss over the payroll implications. There will be several. There's a lot of employee groups that will be impacted. But I think we need to understand, if the paramount issue is, the start date for what's best for kids, then we will have to do our best to mitigate the impact to employees, disclose it, and then let the board decide, what's the overall, the best recommendation. Once we can lay all those issues out for you. How difficult the calendar is. Vicki Evans-Perret has been leading that effort for a few years, and we're going to have to look at the entire calendar really to make sure the state has not given us any leniency on the amount of instructional time. So we're not going to be cutting into instructional time, to provide more training time, more time at the beginning of the year before kids return. So we have some constraints we have to work within, and I'm not saying it can't be done. I've listened to the conversation tonight, and we will get as creative as we can and do our best to mitigate the impact to our employees. But with 23,000 employees on multiple contracts, multiple calendars, there is going to be some consequences. We went through this when we first adopted the original FY21 calendar, and we had some of these conversations. Situations changed. We'll do our best, but please know your workforce will be impacted. In this day and age, hopefully, if there is a gap in pay, that's better than being unemployed or losing your job. So the employees ultimately get their full pay. It's just the timing, it's a cash flow issue. And we need to figure it out as quick as we can, though, so the employees are aware and they know what to expect and they can plan their own personal finances accordingly. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, Mr. Burke, I heard you, and I see another hand go up, but I just want you to make sure you perfectly understand. I'm only one board member, but I will not vote to start the school year if those children cannot log on to us. So there's no way we can get that done by the 10th. There's just no way, and there's no way that's probably going to get done by the 17th because we don't even have the computers coming in. So you've got to find some way to make it work, whether we get pay gaps or not. What's in the best interest of children is to make sure they can start being educated with all the other children. I'm not going to have poor children out there waiting 4 or 5 weeks to start with every other kid because we wanted to start and avoid a pay gap. The employees have to understand they're here for the children. The children come first. So we have to make sure the children can be educated And if it takes a pay gap, it takes a pay gap. Mrs. Brill, you have a question or a comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have two comments. One was that I'd also like to see what the plan could be to get the school buses with the Wi-Fi into some of those areas, and to see if we can call upon some of our business partners and some of the businesses out in the glades and around the county, as well as the libraries, if we're able to access them. But also, I believe that if I remember right, it's Alberto Carvala in Miami-Dade has requested from the Department of Education, I believe, a waiver or some change in the number of instructional hours, or i.e. days. When we're going to be starting later, I think we need to look at a waiver, possibly, that will also help us with the number of days. I don't want children to lose out in any way, shape, or form, but I do think that it might be difficult. I don't really want to see, for families and teachers and employees, us cutting the holidays as much as we would have to. So I think staff's going to have their hands full with the work, accommodating this. But I agree with Mr. Barbieri that we really need to make sure we educate all of our children.
Can I respond to some of that just real quick? With the executive order from the governor was clear on the instructional hours. We have to do 900 hours of instruction. Typically, that's 5 hours a day for 180 days. We may have a little flexibility there. Going back to the computers, though, it's a big issue. And I thought Mr. Howard did an excellent job telling you what was possible and what we've been working on, and he's done a yeoman's job of helping pull that all together. But the reality is, so the connectivity. Our best bet is buying the internet on the students' behalf through Comcast. And now Comcast is not going to serve every community, but it's going to serve a lot. And that's basically $9.95 a month, or say $10 a month, 15,000 kids, about 1.5 million. That's not bad. We can do that. We can make that work. The board has established a budget reserve. If we have to do hotspots, they run about $20 a month. So it's really twice the cost of doing Comcast or AT&T. The connectivity, we're scrambling, but I feel like that's not going to be the hardest obstacle to get over. It's the devices, and it's a worldwide shortage of parts, the components that go into those computers. We have over 60,000 computers that are still out with our kids from last school year. We've got about 35,000 that we can hand out to start the school year. And then we're going to be dependent on the orders coming in. And we have been hammering. HP is the company that can get us the devices the fastest. We've arranged for air freight out of China, and we're working them as hard as we can. But what the commitment is starting the week of August 17th, we'll get about 10,000 devices each week. So I'm not exactly sure. Last year we had a lot of families that were able to take care of their own device needs and internet, and hopefully that continues to some extent. But there is a potential there. We've got about 180,000 kids, and I've only laid out there about 96,000 computers to start the year. So I'm not sure a week or two is going to make a difference in terms of the calendar and our ability to get, if we have to provide a device to every one of our students to start the year. And I just think we got to be upfront about all this stuff in the beginning. And it was in the presentation, and I just want to reinforce it. No matter how hard I work, I cannot make 80,000 computers or steal them from someplace or whatever else. We'll keep talking to our business partners and working with the team. But it's just want to be upfront where we stand.
Dr. Robinson, you were next, then Mrs. Whitfield, then Ms. Brill.
Thank you. And we have 3 minutes left. So the first thing is, I think Mr. Howard's database can tell us how many children still did not have devices. My grandchildren do not need devices from the school district. So the number that we need to meet Mr. Barbieri's metric is smaller than 80,000, I think, right? So I think Mr. Howard can give us a better number, but I'm fairly certain that we won't meet that by even September 15th. The other thing is, let me just be very clear. While I really appreciate the conversation and concern that I hear, we have children that we were leaving behind before the pandemic, right? And so I'm going to ask that we make sure we allocate some of our CARES dollars for supplemental educational services for them and the ones who were not able to log on and so forth, like a hierarchy of needs. Now, the other thing is, it seems to me we're talking about two different start dates. And so I need to be clear. So what I heard was the concern about distance learning and needing to postpone the start date for that. So in my mind, I'm talking, I think I seconded the motion to have the start date for what I thought was students after Labor Day. Now, adults can come in before then, right? So the students can start. I'm not putting this as a motion, but I'm just trying to clarify. The students could start on September 8th and the adults can start 2 weeks prior. And again, I really think that 1 week of preschool is nowhere near enough. I don't really think 2 weeks is enough, right? So in my world, it would be just fine for the adults to start on August 17th and the students to come on September 8th. That's 3 weeks of preschool. The whole world is turned upside down since we were in regular school, right? So I don't really think that would be a waste. But if we want to make it 2 weeks, then fine. But I think we need to clarify what we're saying, when the students start and when the adults start. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield and then Mrs. Brill.
Thank you so much. So I had this vision that tonight or this morning, wherever we are now, we would decide what our plan was going to be and then submit it to the governor to ask for approval. And now I'm a little concerned that without a start date that we can't submit it to the governor. And the reason that it concerns me is that in the event that the Department of Education is going to reject our plan, I'd like to know that sooner than later. So I thought we would be able to do this right now, but now I'm worried that we're going to put off submitting to the governor till next week. Can anyone clarify, that concern?
The plan's due to the governor by July 31st. So I guess potentially, the board could meet on the 22nd. We'd still have time to finalize our plans.
But if we submit it now, you don't think we'll get an answer sooner than 31st? Because I don't want to be scrambling and have him say, no, you have to start on the 10th and no, you have to start in person, because I think that would be tragic.
The district team is still working on writing the narratives in each of those assurances, so we will need to go into next week anyway.
Mrs. Rico.
No, I was just hoping to clarify a couple of things. I mean, Dr. Fenoy indicated the opening of school date of the 24th as a date that he was comfortable with and accepting an amendment to the plan that's before you. One of the reasons is, of course, the executive order talks about an August opening sometime in August. And it's, I think no one will know what DOE is going to do with this plan. But trying to get it as close to their sweet spot in how they're looking at these and what those interpretations and gleaning along the way is really important. So I think that's what we're trying to get at, is to narrow this plan so that it can be put into the format to be filed on that target date, which I guess is, as Mr. Oswald indicated, coming up soon.
Somebody make a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes. Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Dr. Robinson. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. Mrs. Rico, I forgot what I was going to ask you. Oh, Christ, I don't remember what I was going to ask you. I think, Ms. Brill, you were next.
Thank you. So
Got you, Dr.
I'm
Robinson.
comfortable, as I said before, with an August 24th start date. But along with Dr. Robinson's comments, my vision would be that we could allow employees to come back a week or two earlier, because there's going to be training that they're going to have. Whether you're a bus driver, whether you're in food service, whether you're in maintenance, there's going to be other trainings virtually that will need to be taken care of. And some of those workers may also have issues with getting on a computer to do the training. So I just want to bring that up, that I do think that's an opportunity for us, for our employees. Also, I'm sure all of you received the emails that I received from parents that want to get into the schools to be able to get their children's belongings. So I want to put that out there too, which that might be an opportunity in the time period before school begins for them to come in and get their children's, the items that they wanted for their children, as well as for the teachers who are planning to teach from their classroom to set up their classrooms. So that's my thought.
Before I call Ms. McQuinn, then Dr. Robinson, then Mrs. Andrews, Ms. Rico, I remember what I was going to ask you when we were talking. So can we bypass the calendar committee? Can this board set a calendar date other than what's on the calendar already and not go to the calendar committee? Do we have the authority to do that?
So my recommendation, that we had discussed this with administration, and my recommendation was that you guys would need a emergency policy passed next board meeting to supersede to amend the policy around the calendar committee, so that you would just do this based on emergency health, safety, and welfare issues. And that's how it would be handled.
Can we make it retroactive so we pass that next week, and the board, if we decide to pick it the 24th this evening, so the parents know what day we're starting, can we make it a retroactive?
I think you're going to have to. I mean, it's not necessarily retroactive, but you're adopting this plan, and then next week you're going to supersede the policy. It's all that can be done at this point.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McQuinn, you're next, then Dr. Robinson, then Mrs. Andrews, then Mr. Shaw.
I was only going to withdraw, or whatever it is, my amendment in the event that Dr. Fenoy wanted to wait one more week for us to vote. Otherwise, no, I'm for August 31st, but I want to clarify, that's for students. Teachers can come back. This is a parent recommendation that I sent earlier on to Mr. Burke, and his brain is working. But a teacher and or a parent suggested that our teachers can return either the 3rd or the 10th. And then they can take a break to work on their own on whatever they want to do to get ready for students to return. So we could bring our kids back on August 31st, at least giving us 3 more weeks. But teachers would have already started their preschool. We're not asking them to work more days. We're just saying, and I know that puts days on at the end, but I hope I've made that clear. So August 31st for students, teachers, either the 3rd or the 10th. Whatever it was, you know what I mean.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure if that was a motion, so I want to clarify. I want to make the motion that the students would return on August 31st and the adults would return on August 17th. I need a second.
And seconded by Mrs. Andrews at this point. Discussion? Ms. Brill and Mrs. Andrews.
I just need a clarification from Dr. Robinson. What do you mean by adults?
Whichever adults were on the current calendar going to return on August 10th will return on August 17th.
Dr. Robinson, I believe our teachers were scheduled to start on August 3rd.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, you're right. Absolutely, because the students were coming on the 10th, right? Yeah, thank you. So let me correct myself. The adults that would have started on the 3rd would now start on the 17th. Thank you.
Mr. Burke, are you still here?
Yes, sir. I think I need to clarify something. So if the teachers were to start on August 17th and the board stipulates that, you've kind of tied our hands with the pay calendar. They will definitely have a gap in paychecks. They were initially scheduled to return on August 3rd. They could return on August 10th, I think, and avoid the pay gap. And then we'll have to figure out, we're going to have to work with our unions as well to see how we utilize those 5 preschool days to meet the payroll issues and best prepare us for the start of the school year. And I'm hopeful everyone will be collaborative at this point. But, you know, we have a longstanding practice of teachers get 5 days of preschool all in a row. They get 4 planning days throughout the year. They get a post-school day and they get 6 paid holidays. And when we deviate from that, I think we need to work with the union. And I know the board's wish is to try to mitigate the impact on our employees. So it might be best if you stick to the day for students and let staff try to see what we can work out with the calendar to minimize the disruption to employee payroll.
Dr. Rob.
So I will agree to that. I will amend my motion to say that the students would return on August 13th and the staff would return August 17th or prior, as staff determines works best with payroll considerations.
Dr.
That's my.
The 31st.
Said August 31st. August 31st, correct?
What did I say?
13th.
31st.
Oh.
It's very.
Okay.
It's late.
So Dr. Robinson, repeat it with the correct date, please. August 30th.
Okay, let me try to get it together. Go get some coffee. So the students will return on August 31st, and the staff that would have returned on August 3rd will return on or before August 17th, based on administration's directive.
Okay, and Mrs. Andrews is seconding that motion. And then Mr. Shaw wanted to speak, and then I see Ms. Brill now.
And my comment, Mr. Burke, I think he answered it, because my concern is how much of this has got to be negotiated and before we could even implement it. So I think that Mr. Burke addressed that.
Okay, Ms. Brill, did you want to comment on the motion?
Actually, I wanted to offer an amendment by saying that the students would return on the 31st and adults would start on or before August 17th to avoid a pay gap. I'd like to put that in there. So whatever administration believes is the necessary start date.
I think that was the intent of your motion anyway, wasn't it, Dr. Robinson, that they would work it out so that there didn't affect the payroll?
I think in the ideal situation, but I wasn't necessarily including that. I'm not going to tie staff's hands at the moment with that. I would like to avoid a pay gap, but I don't think that I should lock them into that at this point. They hear our direction clearly.
All right, Ms. Brill, so we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded, and the maker of the motion is not willing to change it. So we have to vote on the motion. It's on the floor. So it's the 31st for employees and honor before the 17th. Is that what you said, Dr. Robinson? I mean,
31st for students.
31st for students and honor before the 17th for, yeah, it's Thursday. So I forgot what we were doing on Wednesday. So, all right. So any further discussion on that motion? Mr. Burke.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I know it's late, but I'm really concerned about this term adult. We've got 23,000 employees. We have people that normally start 2 days before the school year. And if you say now that they must start by August 17th, you may have just taken on a very big additional expense because we're now going to have to. So I just really think, this is going to be hard enough trying to figure out this calendar, focusing on the student start date. We really need to take some time to sort through all we have a myriad of contracts from 180 days to 260 days. And I need to sort through this with the calendar folks and the payroll people and try to avoid us, tying our hands and causing more.
Yeah, let me just say this. Once again, I'd like to ask the board, could you please give us a week so we do not put you in a bad situation?
Dr. Robinson.
So I will, am I on? Yeah. So I'll amend it to say, I'm going to amend it to say that I want students to start on August 31st and the staff that would have started on August 3rd will start on or before August 17th. Period. That's where I am. Okay, so that's it. That's it. I don't know if that I need a second. I'm about to go to sleep now.
I think that's the same motion you made already, and Mrs. Andrews already seconded that.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to say that I don't want to change it to just make it just the students only. I think that the motion gives the superintendent and staff wiggle room on working with the unions and all, so that, because my real point is, I think that they need at least 2 weeks of preschool, because there's been too many changes and there's too much professional development. There's protocols that they have to learn and so forth. And I think we're doing staff a true disfavor if we give them less than 2 weeks preschool.
Mr. Shaw, then Ms. Brill, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I agree with the August 31st start date, but I'm going to vote against this only because, and I think I've said it for the last 10 years, we get to a point where we start making bad decisions when we've gone too long and we're not really thinking this thing through. I think there are so many issues that need to be done. I really do want to approve it, but I really believe that the superintendent, when he makes a request of this board to hold off and let them do it the right way so we don't come back next week and look silly making a really foolish decision. I can't live with that. So that's just my opinion on that one.
Ms. Brill.
And thank you, Mr. Shaw. I feel the same way. I think that the public knows what our intent is, but I don't want to tie everybody's hands around it. So, clearly they know we're not going to be starting on the date that we had originally said. And let's see what Dr. Fenoy comes back with.
Ms. Whitfield and then Dr. Robinson.
Yeah, so reiterating what my colleagues have said, I agree. I don't think we should be making decisions at 12:15 at night that will be impacting us for the next week. I would like to approve this plan so that staff has some direction to go forward. And if next week we can talk about this start date, I obviously love the August 31st start date for students because I mentioned that earlier in the evening. But I don't want to mess. I mean, we've tortured our staff so much lately. This has been a lot for everyone. So I just want to, if we can do anything to make their lives just the tiniest bit more reasonable, I think we should. So I would like to do the 31st, but I don't want to do this motion right now, this amendment. I don't think it's prudent.
I have Dr. Robinson, then Mrs. Andrews, then Mrs. McQuinn.
Call the question.
All in favor? One. Opposed? Opposed? Please put your hands up so I know who's opposed. Ms. Brill's opposed, Whitfield, Shaw, Andrews, McQuinn, and I'll reluctantly vote against your motion, Dr. Robinson, but I really wanted the parents to have a date tonight, but I guess we can't do that. Hopefully the parents will know that we at least want to move it a week or two in the future. And again, I'm not comfortable starting it before we're sure that all of our children can log on with us. Dr. Robinson.
So I'd like to offer a motion that the students start on August 31st.
Mrs. Andrews, are you seconding that? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for the students to start on August 31st and no mention of the employees. So I guess that gives Dr. Fenoy the opportunity to do whatever he needs to do. Ms. McQuinn, you have want to comment?
Yeah, on this, right, on that last one. Is it possible for us to approve the plan except for the starting dates for the students? Is that something that we could bring back for next week?
I would accept that motion.
Yes.
I'm not sure what you just changed from Dr. Robinson's motion. Somebody explain to me what you just changed.
Yeah, but Dr. Robinson, rather than say.
Oh, no, don't tell me I'm frozen again, guys.
We're just removing the dates.
We can hear you, Mr. Barbieri.
Yep.
Mrs. McQuinn, you're gonna have to repeat that because I'm getting a glitch on my end over here and I didn't hear what you said.
I think I was talking over you. What I'm suggesting, what I'm proposing is that we accept the plan except for the dates for the return of employees and students. Let that come back to us next week.
But we have a motion on the floor from Dr. Robinson that says students the 31st. And there's no mention in the motion with respect to employees. That was seconded by Mrs. Andrews. So unless Dr. Robinson is willing to change her motion, we have a motion on the floor. Further discussion on Dr. Robinson's motion. Mrs. Whitfield, then Mrs.
I just wanted to ask Dr. Fenoy if he had any comment on this. I really want to know if it's something that he thinks we can pull off voting on tonight. I would love to do it, but I just want to at least check in.
So, and I guess the question is in reference to moving the student start date back. Yes. So
Dr. Fenoy,
again, I think at the end of the day, in the situation that we're in, we'll try to make it work. However, I'm sure there's some implications for even moving this kid start back. I don't know if it's testing or seat time. I mean, I have to defer that to Keith. But what would end up happening is if the board allowed me to bring something back, I could have the calendar committee bring you changes to the future dates to augment. Like we can bring you all of that for you to really look at it and see. Because what I would hate to do is make this decision, and then we get to Thanksgiving. Now we got to have another discussion about moving days then the holidays, and then, are we going to test the kids before the break? I'd rather just do that and then let you see the consequences of an entire year before we do it. But I have no problem with pushing the kids start date back. I just can't be honest with you and tell you that there isn't an impact of that decision. Not right now, I couldn't. I don't know if Keith or anyone else would, but I can't speak to that.
Mrs. Andrews, before Mr. Oswald, do you want to comment on what the superintendent just said?
No, I would just agree. We would need the time to look at the consequences of pushing that to the 31st. More than likely, first semester exams will be pushed into they would be pushed into January. So, Mrs.
Andrews.
Yeah, I still want to go back to tell you that I'm still concerned about the children getting their technology as well as internet connections, and we know that they're not going to have it in time. That's a part of this whole thing with pushing back. Certainly, I don't want anybody to lose any of their salaries, so we just need to do it correctly. We spent all this time in here tonight, and if we can't get it straight, the big thing is all these kids are going to be without their technology and internet service. So that's a big deal. And the other big deal is we need to try to work on making sure people don't lose any money. So whatever we decide tonight, let's try to do it cleanly.
Before we do another thing, the board clerk just told me we're past the legal time, so we need another motion to extend for another 15 minutes till 12:30. So do I have a motion by Ms. McQuinn, seconded by Ms. Whitfield? All in favor, all opposed, motion carries 7-0. Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So for the sake of my sanity, since we have talked, I think we've gone 180 degrees in some respects. I'm going to withdraw the motion that I had put forward and offer the motion that we accept the plan as presented without the start dates.
Seconded by, looks like everybody. We'll pick Mrs. Andrews since she's been anyway. So the board clerk knows who seconded that motion. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Rico, please.
Dr. Robinson said accept, and I think that the item says approve. I know it's.
I'm sorry, approve. You're absolutely correct. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just wanted to say yay.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Superintendent, unless you have something else, it's Thursday morning and we should probably all go to bed. So are you done with us?
Am I done with you? The question is, are you done with me?
I think we're done with each other, I think. Well, we need a motion to adjourn.
We will bring you back information next week.
Thank you. Motion made by Mrs. Whitfield, second of my IT staff are all standing here with their hands in the air. Ms. Brill, we'll pick Ms. Brill on this one. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Good morning, everyone. Go home. I'm going home. You all go to bed. Good night.
Good night.